Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if neglected Naruto Behemoth High School DxD. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by AVeryAverageWriter and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1. Prologue. Ha ha ha. A luscious, green forest spanned on for miles, with the occasional river twisting and turning under the trees. Large, thick branches sprouted from various trunks, and the sheer size of each wooden limb blocked out any hints of moonlight. Under the shadow of leaves and wood, a faint outline of a figure could be seen. It took in deep, shuddering breaths as its whole body shook in desperation to take in more oxygen. To a mere human, his figure would have been grotesque, two horribly deformed wings budding from the upper body, slitted pupils, abnormally sharp teeth hanging from his gums, and various animal heads emerging from the abdominal area. Yet for all his ghastly looks, bulging muscles, unbelievably high kill count, and the ability to fly, the monster seemed scared. No, scratch that, it was absolutely terrified. Snap. He whirled around, still greedily sucking in air, and a horrified expression made its way onto his face. Where are you? He shouted, looking around and turning his head for any sign of him. It took all of his courage to even get that out of his throat. The man, no the hunter, was just that scary. Of course, he had heard of rumors and of his reputation, but he had merely dismissed the possibility of meeting him. Besides, hearing about him and seeing him was vastly different. A 6-foot, towering redhead that usually donned a black coat with red clouds sewed randomly. An assassin that could back up his talk with finesse, skill, and strength. The now brightest half-devil of his generation and in possession of an unique and devastatingly efficient sacred gear. Snap. And the figure started to curl itself up, its animal head snapping and gnashing their teeth but still keeping a wary lookout. Snap. That was 3 now, his calling card. Just like a black cat is a sign of bad luck and a 4-leaf clover symbolizes luck, those 3 snaps foretold certain death. Are you really that scared? A cool, suave voice bounced from tree to tree before reaching his ears, and the figure could only fall backwards with a blank, resigned stare. I expected more from A.S. ranked stray. He stepped into a position that allowed for a good look of his face to the figure. The figure took one glance at his face and blanched, as all the color from his mutated face seemingly disappeared. It wasn't that its hunter was devastatingly handsome with spiky, shoulder-length hair. It wasn't the toned arms packed with tight, dense muscle that screamed strength. No, it was those eyes. Those piercing blue eyes that peered straight into his soul, if he had one, and demanded utmost respect. The stray couldn't help but be drawn to that beautiful, stunning blue abyss that promised death and only death. Glurk. Too late. His eyes weren't trained enough to keep up with the sheer speed of his hunter. All he could do was look up at the man and look back down to the ground, only to see his chest pierced by his arm. All he could do was spit up blood, and the crimson liquid slowly made its way down his chin, which then dripped onto that same arm. Drip, drip, drip. The mysterious redhead, while wonder who it could be, waited for the stray's eyes to lose a burning spark, called life before pulling his arm back out with a sickening squelch. He squatted down to the ground and wiped the said arm on the grass, and used his other hand to pull out a phone. It's death, the job is done. I see. Oh, come on. I was expecting a good job or something like that. Whatever. Just make sure to have a bowl of ramen awaiting my return. Please? Beep 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 beep. He turned off his phone and proceeded to get up from the ground. While stretching his legs out, he placed the device on his arm and it vanished with a poof. Did she just hang up on me? Chapter 1. Enter Naruto Gremory. Disclaimer: I don't know Naruto or DxD High School. The Gremory mansion was nothing short of lavish. There were carefully trimmed hedges near the front of the entrance, along with a multitude of spurting fountains. If one went to the back of the mansion, they would see a circular fountain with even more land branching out behind the said fountain. Further on, there were huge mountains that continually astounded passing devils with its massive size. On the smooth roads leading to the Gremory mansion, a carriage could be seen, its wheels silent as it seemingly glided towards its destination. Inside the carriage was none other than Naruto Uzumaki, soon to be known as Naruto Gremory. He was dressed in new, casual clothes, which was odd, as he had been living in poverty all his life. His normal fit consisted of tattered rags and plastic bags. Luckily for him, this Grafia insisted that he be all cleaned up for the Gremory family. And so, he was cleaned, groomed, and then fitted into clothes, all for the sake of appearances. That wasn't the only difference, as he was unconventionally silent, even more so than usual. The reason? He had been informed that he was the son of Zeodicus, and a meeting had been arranged between him and Zeodicus and Venelana Gremory, the parents of the Mao, Surzek's Lucifer. Next to him was the supposedly strongest queen of the underworld, Graphia Lucifuge, wife to the said Mao. If her majestic, goddess-like looks weren't enough to make him nervous, her strict and stoic personality was enough to make him wet his pants. Thankfully, he had control over his bladder, but it didn't take anything away from the tension of meeting his family. Family? The word tasted so strange in Naruto's mouth. As a boy growing up in the streets, he hardly knew what family meant. He was deprived of the bare essentials that only bonds could give him: love. Fighting other half-devils for the barest morsel of food and water was a daily occurrence for him. Apparently, that was all going to have to change. At least, that was what Graphia had told him. But of course, Naruto didn't trust the silver-haired princess's honeyed promises of a comfortable lifestyle with his new family. There was that word again. Family. The carriage had stopped. It was time. With his heart pounding, Naruto carefully stepped out of the carriage and was shortly followed by Graphia. In front of him were three figures that would change his life forever. Welcome. While Zeodicus looked confident on the outside, he was inwardly sweating in the nervousness. He felt threatened to eat him up from the inside. It was his son, for Mao's sake. Would Naruto hate him for not being there for him for the first 6 years of his life? Once Zeodicus laid his eyes upon his son, all thoughts vanished, and only one thought ran across his mind: he has my hair. Hearing the greeting, Naruto looked up and saw them. His new family. He was going to have to get used to saying that word. While Naruto didn't respond immediately, he took this chance to look over these figures. Zeodicus, his father, had taken the appearance of a middle-aged, handsome-looking man. He had long crimson-red hair tied in a loose ponytail along with bright blue eyes. Naruto instantly deduced that he had gotten most of his looks from this man. To his left was a buxom, brown-haired woman with light purple eyes. For some reason unknown to Naruto, her beautiful face was marred by clenched teeth and a barely held-back fury. While Naruto could sense some sort of parental care and love from Zeodicus, he only felt enmity radiating from this woman. Yup, that definitely wasn't his mother. To the right of Zeodicus was the Surzex Lucifer. While Naruto lacked education, even idiots with an empty head in the underworld knew who Surzex Lucifer was. He was the Lucifer and said to be the strongest of the 4 Maos. Using his power of destruction, he played a pivotal role in fighting the old Satan faction. He was the ace for the anti-Satan faction and rightfully treated as a hero. Appearance-wise, he was a handsome man who seemed to be in his early 20s. He had shoulder-length crimson hair and blue-green eyes, that he obviously inherited from Zeodicus. He had a more curious and thoughtful expression and luckily for Naruto, didn't appear to be outright disgusted by Naruto's presence. Thank you, Graphia. I'll take it from here. Zeodicus closed the distance between him and for a while, stood there awkwardly. He didn't know what to do. Should he hug him? Maybe a handshake. Quickly making up his mind, he then placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. May I be excused, dear husband? Zeodicus frowned and turned back to face his wife. Don't you want to welcome our son, my dear? You mean your son? Venelana had a frosty look on her already twisted face, clearly unhappy with the current circumstances. Yup. Definitely not his mother. Zeodicus winced and a bead of sweat slowly dripped down his temple and then to his cheek. This wasn't the greatest start. In an attempt to diffuse the rising tension of the situation, Surzex stepped up and said in a kind voice, Nice to meet you, Naruto. My name is Surzex Lucifer and I'll be your older brother from here on out. Zeodicus inwardly praised his eldest son and was elated that the situation wasn't completely ruined. His happiness was bound to crash and burn, as Venelana merely scoffed and turned back to the house. DXD? Venelana was furious. She was never on board with the idea of raising a child that wasn't even hers. To make it worse, it was her child. Kushina Uzumaki, a red-haired harlot that nearly stole away Zeodicus from her. Kushina wasn't some weakling either. She was a woman that could back up her talk and then some. She was exceptionally strong for a human and her sacred gear, Chain Jail, made her as strong as Venelina. Her sacred gear was capable of restraining the most ferocious yokai, and there were rumors of Kushina being able to restrain even Yasaka. Her stunning crimson hair and beautiful, purple eyes didn't help either. As Venelana stormed inside the mansion, her expression and body language quickly sent all maids and butlers scurrying out of her way. Clearly, she was looking for something, or better yet someone. The question was what, or rather who was she looking for? Where is she? Where is she? Venelana mumbled under her breath. No matter how unladylike it was, she had no other choice. It was vital that she got to Rias before anyone. She yelled RIS. A young 6-year-old pure-blood devil quickly presented herself in front of Venelana, as she knew that this just wasn't the day to push her mother's buttons. Why yes, mother. Rias's tone helped Venelana realize that her daughter was scared of her, and she quickly restrained her anger to the best of her ability. Rias, there will be a boy coming into our residence very soon. Do not, under any circumstances, associate yourself with him. No matter what your father or Sairaorg tells you, he is not your brother. He's just a mistake. Do I make myself clear? With her tirade finished, Venelana fixed a stern glare on Rias. Rias, visibly scared and worried about her own well-being, quickly responded with a yes, mother. Of course, she could have questioned her mother and asked why. Why is he a mistake? What did he do to get you so mad? But her 8-year-old instincts overridden her curiosity, and shut her mouth shut. After hearing her response, anger was seemingly drained from Venelana's face, and all that was left was a cold, determined look. It was time to show Naruto his place. DxD. Venelana walked back out, and as she made her way back to the entrance, she witnessed her husband finish setting the ground rules and what the future would look like for Naruto. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Dear husband, would you mind if I talk to young Naruto alone? Her underlying tone made no room for argument, and Sairaorg hardly put up resistance as Venelana dragged Naruto back into the mansion. Walk with me. Again, her words came out as a command, and Naruto was forced to keep up with Venelana's brisk pace. After twisting and turning around the mansion's seemingly infinite walkways, Venelana suddenly stopped, and Naruto took that as an unspoken command and stopped as well. Do you know why I brought you here? For Naruto, it seemed like a lose-lose situation. There was no doubt in his mind. If he opened his mouth to respond, she would fire back a derogatory statement. If he didn't say anything, it was more than likely that she would sneer at his inability to talk. Either way, she hated his guts, that much was clear. From here on out, whatever he did would never please her. The sheer hostility she was exuding made that much clear. I brought you here to tell you something. She sneered and started to circle him in a similar manner a shark would do to an injured prey. You're nothing. Her bluntness surprised even herself. I don't know what possessed my husband to bring you here, but you should know your place. You're just a mistake. A mistake. She carefully observed his face to make sure her words had been understood. After her brief analysis, and with her speech finished, she turned around and left, intending to meet up with her husband and son. A mistake. That's what she called him. A mistake. Did that mean he was one? Naruto mused as he blindly followed Venelana back to Sairaorg and Sairaorg. TCH. Not a chance in hell. No one told Naruto what he was. He was Naruto fucking Uzumaki, and he'd rather kill himself than listen to that poor excuse of a woman. No, he'd break through every obstacle she set in front of him and ask for more. No, Naruto wouldn't settle for being a mistake. Naruto was going to rise past all these so-called pure-blood devils and show them what he was capable of. Once he was stronger than everyone, he would march back to his home, find Venelana, and ask if he turned out to be a mistake. Yes. That sounded wonderful. But first, he was hungry. He just had to find out if they made ramen here. DxD. Time skip 2 years later. Naruto was now 8 years old, and remarkably fit for his age. The days of being a malnourished thief were behind him, as he could now pass off as a good-looking, well-mannered high-class devil. Even though Naruto was missing for the first 6 years of his life, Sairaorg pulled some strings and arranged for Naruto to receive his peerage set at the age of 10, just like everyone else. When Venelana had heard of this news, she was an inch away from blasting both her husband and Naruto and dismantling their atoms until they were nothing. For once in his life, Naruto was truly grateful for Grafia stepping in and calming Venelana down. After that incident, Naruto truly realized how outclassed he was in the grand scheme of things. To Venelana, he was a mere annoyance. To gods and goddesses, he would be nothing more than an ant. A normal person would be scared shitless after a near-death experience. Naruto was not normal by any means. Instead of fear, he felt excitement and curiosity. Excitement because he wanted to test the limits of his powers. Curiosity because he wondered how he would reach that level without a powerful bloodline like that. But again, Naruto was only motivated by these events. While Naruto wasn't a super devil by any means, it didn't take away from his prodigious abilities. While his demonic reserves and muscles haven't fully matured, he trained both aspects. While Rias was busy indulging in Sairaorg's doting and watching anime after anime, he honed his control over his reserves, practiced elemental attacks, and conditioned his body as well. As a result, his control over demonic energy was exceptional for his age, and he certainly wasn't a weakling in the physical aspect. Normally, a devil would choose one area to specialize in, maybe two if they were motivated enough. Naruto, on the other hand, had it all planned out. He knew that specializing in only one area of expertise was a bad idea. If he focused purely on his demonic manipulation and gave physical training none of his attention, he would have no defense if a physical-type opponent managed to slip by his magical attacks and took the fight to a close-range one. At the same time, conditioning only his body would eventually lead to a scenario of him being bombarded with elemental attacks by a long-range specialist. Naruto showed remarkable foresight by thinking about the positives and negatives of being a pure specialist and of versatility. Even though these thoughts swirled around his head, he couldn't help but be drawn to certain types of attacks. For example, his control over fire and lightning was better than his control over water, earth, and wind. There was just something that drew his attention to those two elements. The sheer heat and power fire emanated and the pure, stinging pain and paralyzation one would suffer when encountering lightning were all aspects that stole his attention. In general, Naruto preferred his magic over his muscles, though he reluctantly pulled himself together to run, do squats, and finish his push-ups. Not only that, but Naruto also yearned to find an ace, a unique ability that he would use when there was no other option. Despite his intense research and training, he failed to discover his ace. He was equally excited and frustrated. No matter, Naruto was young. He had plenty of more opportunities to search for a unique technique or fighting style. If that wasn't enough, no one knew of his capabilities and enormous potential, which was Naruto's intentions in the first place. His family doted on his half-sister, Rias, and that in itself presented a perfect opportunity for him to refine his skills while not drawing any unwanted attention. Though Naruto couldn't help but feel a tad bit jealous of all the love and adoration that was showered upon Rias. He had to continuously reassure himself that this was for the best, which didn't always help. Of course, Naruto couldn't blame himself. For all his maturity and intelligence, he was only 8 years old, and like other 8-year-olds, he craved attention. With his willpower, he pushed these desires away and focused on his training. Speaking of Rias, due to Venelana's influence and interference, the relationship between her and Naruto was strained. While she didn't go out of her way to belittle him, the interactions between them weren't pleasant. She refused to be around him and did her best to avoid him. As if Naruto cared about his relationship with the spoiled princess. He had plenty of things to do and accomplish. As for right now, Naruto had to wake up. Beep 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 beep. Crash. Naruto was barely awake, as he really pushed himself last night. Experimenting with new spells without supervision didn't sound like a good idea, and it certainly didn't turn out like one. I don't understand why I set up an alarm clock if I'm just gonna break it every damn time, Naruto groaned and half-heartedly began to put on his shirt and pants. His room was spacious, which was expected when living in the Gremory mansion. After all, high-class devils were known for their greed and richness, especially the families of the 72 pillars. His dirty clothes were neatly stacked in a basket, which was located in the far right corner. Near the window was Naruto's desk, filled with various books that delved into tactics and elemental attacks. Next to these books were his notes on how to improve his control and strategies he'd use in the future. In the far left corner, he had a yoga mat and a pull-up bar he utilized daily. Next to the wall was a queen bed with luxurious sheets and a fluffy pillow laying on the top. Naruto then proceeded to make his bed while yawning during the chore. Walking over to his desk, he frowned before taking his notes and placing them in a manila folder. He didn't need anyone peeking at his notes. Not that anyone would dare to associate themselves with him by entering his room. Still yawning, Naruto awkwardly shuffled out of the room and prepared for his daily run. But first, he needed some breakfast. He was a growing boy after all. He quickly made his way down the stairs, made a couple of turns, and finally reached the dining area. For Naruto, the downside to having such a large home was evident. Getting to the dining area was a chore in itself. Making his way to the entrance? Forget it. It used too much effort for Naruto's liking. Of course, he could use the teleportation spell, but he didn't want to reveal that he had that in his arsenal. After grabbing a couple of fruits and scarfing down a simple breakfast of eggs and bacon, he started a light jog in the back of the mansion. The beauty of nature in the underworld was something Naruto greatly appreciated. The groomed flower beds and trimmed hedges provided a sharp contrast to the untamed, wild allure of the forests. The fresh, untainted air always managed to rejuvenate him just in time for his morning exercises. As Naruto got comfortable and stretched out his joints, he picked up the pace. Running was something he enjoyed, even though he'd much rather stay in his bed and relish the warmth and comfort. Feeling the air rush past his face is an experience that Naruto never gets tired of. The feeling of his responsibilities floating away every time his foot pounds into the ground. The feeling of being free. Once the euphoria fades and the run grinds to a stop, Naruto can practically hear the chains clasping back onto his shoulders and torso. Having to deal with Venelana only put more and more stress upon him. Stress that he could escape only when training. With a heavy sigh, Naruto made his way back to the mansion. For most people, a sweat-covered, heavily breathing 8-year-old boy would be a strange sight, but for the Gremory maids and butlers, it was a daily occurrence. As they bowed before his presence, he spoke up. "You know, you don't have to bow to me. I haven't done anything to earn your respect. Besides, I'm not that kind of person." Before the maids could respond, he put on a burst of speed and quickly ran up the stairs, escaping to the solitude of his room yet again. DxD? Naruto emerged from the shower with his hair damp and a towel around his neck. Standing at an impressive height, for an 8-year-old of 4 foot 6 inches, Naruto had a toned body as well. While he didn't quite have a six-pack, he still packed some muscle. With his piercing blue eyes and spiky red hair, Naruto certainly wasn't ugly either. Most maids and women agreed that he would grow up to be a handsome devil. He quickly changed into dark blue sweatpants and a crisp, white t-shirt. Taking his towel, he meticulously folded it before placing it in the laundry basket. After taking care of his hygiene, he sat down at his desk once more, opened a book about lightning manipulation, and turned the pages. 2 hours later, Naruto was fully immersed in this book. It stated a couple of key points that Naruto quickly noted. He was fascinated with the possibilities of lightning application and wondered if he could combine his physical aspects with lightning manipulation. Crap! He realized it was 2 o'clock and faintly recalled that he would be having a guest over. He closed the book shut, put away his notes, and made his way to the dining area. As he walked down the stairs, he explored the possibilities of this opportunity. He did remember that this guest was his age and briefly pondered if he could befriend this new guest. But he had to meet this guest first. He quickly shut off his thoughts for the time being and focused on making his way to the dining area. "And this is my son, Sairaorg Bael." Naruto heard a feminine voice that was clearly not Venelana's or any other females he was familiar with. "I am honored to meet you, Lord Gremory and Lady Gremory." This seemingly monotone voice that most likely belonged to this Sairaorg Bael echoed in the unnecessarily large dining area. Naruto broke into a light jog and burst into the meeting. "And there he is! My son, Naruto Gremory." Zyatticus boomed, visibly pleased, and relieved that Naruto made it on time. "Yo! Am I late?" Naruto spoke in a nonchalant tone. "You're just on time." Naruto could recognize that voice from anywhere. Venelana Gremory. He turned his gaze to his stepmother, and witnessed the visibly restrained rage and disgust on her face. Internally, Naruto scoffed. He never really understood her hate towards him. Sure, he was a half-devil, but so were the reincarnated devils, and they were never on the receiving end of this special anger. As far as he knew, he didn't kill anyone important to her, and his manners weren't the worst. Okay, maybe his manners were pretty bad, but they didn't warrant this kind of hate. Naruto was interrupted in his impromptu musing as his father asked, "Why don't you entertain young Sairaorg?" "Sure." Naruto waved to the boy, trying to appear as amiable as possible. "Follow me." Sairaorg turned to his mother, and she smiled back at him. "Go on. I'm sure hanging out with people your age is better than talking with us." "Of course, mother." He bowed and stiffly walked over to Naruto's side. Naruto took that as the signal and started walking to his room. "Right, this is an opportunity to make allies. If I manage to befriend him, I'll have someone to help my ambitions in the future." Naruto scratched his cheek and wondered how to start this conversation. "So, you have any hobbies?" "Training," was his curt reply. "He's even worse than me at this friend-making thing." Naruto internally sweat dropped and started to brainstorm other ways to get him to open up. Luckily, they both reached his room. Naruto opened the door and let Sairaorg in. He robotically walked in, and Naruto took that time to observe his guest. There was no doubt in Naruto's mind that Sairaorg was more of a physical fighter type, and this was confirmed when he walked over to Naruto's pull-up bar and started one-handed pull-ups. "So, you're part of the Bael clan?" was Naruto's awkward way of trying to start a conversation. Unfortunately for Naruto, this comment seemed to offend Sairaorg, as he tightened his facial muscles and continued his exercises with even more vigor. While Naruto did indeed notice these changes, he was inept to social skills and only poked the sleeping bear even more by asking, "You guys got the destruction power thingy, right?" Sairaorg, in a show of strength, nearly pulled the bar out of the wall and jumped down to the ground. "I fucked up, didn't I?" Naruto's sweat dropped again. "Is that your way of mocking me?" Sairaorg whirled around with a near-murderous look in his eyes. "Eh? Don't act all innocent. You know that I don't have the destruction power thingy. So I'll ask one more time, are you mocking me?" With each word he spat out his throat, Sairaorg's tone grew more dangerous and the volume got louder and louder. Naruto knew his next words were important, so he carefully chose his words before speaking again. Unfortunately for him, he once again proved his inability to interact with others. "I'm sorry, but I think this is all a misunderstanding. Is it a problem that you don't possess the trademark of the Bael clan?" Sairaorg's fists clenched hard and there was practically steam coming out of his ears. Naruto at least showed that his head wasn't completely empty, as he recognized the killer intent coming from Sairaorg. While Naruto remained calm on the outside, he tensed his muscles and got ready for a physical response. In a deceptively calm voice, Sairaorg growled, "You are mocking me." Naruto was now really worried. How did the situation spiral out of control? But before he could say anything, Sairaorg rushed towards Naruto with his fists raised. Fast. Naruto barely avoided the bull rush as he rolled to the side. Sairaorg didn't stop there, as he attempted an axe kick that again barely missed Naruto's head and instead crashed into the floor with a resounding crack. Naruto was really confused. What did he do? Why was Sairaorg so mad? But this wasn't the time for that, as Sairaorg unleashed a barrage of punches and kicks. Each strike was dangerously close to landing its mark, as Naruto evaded them and felt the wind behind each one. Naruto was doing well for the most part, but he made a fatal mistake. He underestimated Sairaorg's strength. Ducking to dodge a roundhouse kick, Naruto then attempted to block his follow-up punch by putting his arms in an X formation. Kirk. My forearm is broken. Not only that, but my right arm, which was placed underneath the left in the block, also hurts too. What is his mom feeding this kid? Naruto internally panicked. No other choice then. I have to use magic, but I'll stick to the smaller scaled spells. I don't want to destroy my room. With a flick of his right wrist, four magic circles appeared behind him, and from them, four thin, flickering dragons emerged. Idiot, with a linear attack like that, dodging it will be a joke. Sairaorg scoffed and slowly sidestepped. He was wrong though, and the four lightning dragons quickly homed on to Sairaorg. Latching onto his limbs, they burst into pure voltage and shocked him, paralyzing him for a good 2 seconds. Seeing that opportunity, Naruto rushed from his position and landed a powerful punch to his solar plexus. With Sairaorg visibly winded, Naruto took the chance and started talking. Look, I really don't know about the situation, and I can swear that I wasn't trying to be condescending or anything. Naruto stepped forward with his hands raised up. Naruto took that as a sign of non-aggression and continued. I understand that this is a personal and sensitive matter for you, but talking about it will make you feel better. Trust me. Naruto was about to try and convince him in another way, but Sairaorg started to talk and Naruto sat down on the floor, making himself comfortable. As you know, the Bael clan is famous for its destructive powers, but I was born without it. As a result, I was shunned and my mother was exiled along with me. His teeth clenched and slammed his fist on the ground. He treated me like trash. He roared. He threw me out like I was nothing. What kind of world do we live in, if a father kicks out a son for something he had no control over? He softly uttered, and at this point, tears were freely streaming down Sairaorg's face. The room was silent, and all that could be heard was drip drip. For once in his life, Naruto could relate to another person. He knew exactly what to say. You know, I lived in pretty bad conditions for the first 6 years of my life. I didn't know my parents, and I had to fight other devils for food and water. Naruto shook his head, took a deep breath, and continued. After a couple of beatings, I was ready to take my life. But there was just something so vulgar about the action I was about to commit. He shakily breathed in, his eyes glazed as he relived painful memories. I hated myself for that. I couldn't believe that I was going to take my life just because I got beat up a couple of times. But it was so hard to keep on going, to keep on fighting. So instead, I made a blood oath to myself that I would never ever give up and I would never go back on my word. Naruto raised his head up, determination and pride shining in his eyes. I can't say I understand what you've been through, but I've had my share of hardships in my life too. Naruto stood up and walked over to Sairaorg. Let me tell you something, this whole time, we're running a race called life. Some people have a head start, but guys like us, we have a handicap. But to give up because it's too hard, Naruto shook his head. That's cowardly. That's the way out for losers. The true test is whether you can brave the obstacles and keep on running. If you can do that, trust me, you'll come out stronger. You'll come out as a winner. Naruto offered his hand to Sairaorg. So tell me, are you a winner or a loser? Sairaorg looked at the hand and a faint smile crept onto his face. He took his hand and Naruto pulled him up. A new friendship was born. Time skip another 2 years later. Haha. Naruto was kneeling on the ground, panting. The last attack took a lot out of him, and while his control was refined, his reserves weren't at the level he wanted them to be. Pushing himself every day and night could only go so far. He was only human, after all. Well, half human at least. And not bad. Sairaorg was in a similar situation, as he was on one knee with his clothes fried and sizzling. The elemental combination attack of fire and wind was frightening, to say the least. With Naruto summoning a large magic circle and a colossal wave of flames shooting out of it, the attack was widespread and thus, something Sairaorg couldn't avoid. To make it even worse, he fanned the flames with blades of wind. At this point, it was safe to say that the friendship between Sairaorg and Naruto was blooming. Every chance they got, they fought each other in intensive battles that others could only describe as deathmatches. In their free time, they trained even harder in an attempt to shock each other with their newfound strength. TCH. I see. Can keep going. Naruto forced himself to stand, though he was slightly swaying due to his exhaustion. Sairaorg could only scoff at his friend's determination and pride. As if, "You're about to collapse any second." In most battles, Sairaorg attempted to get in close to make the fight more personal, as his strength, speed, and durability could easily shift a physical battle in his favor. On the other hand, Naruto preferred to keep his distance and barrage Sairaorg with his arsenal of elemental attacks before going for an elemental combination finisher. However, it didn't mean Sairaorg could outright ignore Naruto's strength. Naruto hadn't slacked off at all in his conditioning. While not quite on Sairaorg's level, his physical attributes were nothing to scoff at. Naruto then promptly collapsed on his back, facing the dark purple sky. He definitely shouldn't have said those words. It came back to bite him in the ass. Even with his vision obscured, he could see Sairaorg's smug smile stretching across his face. If he wasn't so tired, he would have stomped over to him and punched him right in the mouth. Sairaorg collapsed as well, his bulky torso shooting dust everywhere on impact with the ground. Ha! Naruto was somewhat satisfied with the outcome. He wasn't able to beat Sairaorg this time, but a draw was better than a loss. You win some and you lose some. Besides, he couldn't exactly turn back the time and change the outcome. What he could do was review his mistakes, learn from them, and beat Sairaorg's ass next time. Sairaorg's voice cut through the silent peace like a hot knife through butter as he spoke. So what's the scoreboard now? I think it's 76 to 75 in my favor. Naruto somehow found the energy to sit back up and argue. What? What is this blasphemy coming out of your mouth? Naruto harumphed and crossed his arms, clearly unsatisfied with Sairaorg's statement. As far as I'm concerned, this match ended as a draw. It's still 75 to 75. Sairaorg choked on his own breath but composed himself easily. I don't think so. You fell down first, so it's my win. And so, the two so-called mature 10-year-olds devolved into an argument over the outcome of the battle. After a good 5 minutes of squabbling, Naruto decided to take the high road and gave the win to Sairaorg. Naruto was winded now, as he yelled himself hoarse over a petty quarrel, but he still managed to converse with Sairaorg. So tomorrow, huh? I still can't believe we're getting our pieces tomorrow. Humph. I'll bet my peerage will turn out even better than yours, believe it. As a close friend of Sairaorg, Naruto knew exactly which buttons to push and what to say to make Sairaorg snap. Naruto hid his smile as Sairaorg's face grew red from arguing yet again. Ah, the beauty of friendship. Well, this was fun and all, but I think I need to head back. Naruto stretched his arms and carefully stood up. Come back stronger, eh? I don't want these fights to get too one-sided. Sairaorg sat up and his eyes twinkled with playfulness. TCH. I don't have time for this. Naruto quickly cast his teleportation spell and vanished. Sairaorg fell back down and put his arms behind his head. The night sky was unusually beautiful tonight, as the stars shone with abnormal brightness, complementing the deep purple color of the sky. Man, if I knew this was what friendship was like, I would have befriended him ages ago, Sairaorg told himself as he slowly but surely drifted away into dreamland, still laying on his training ground. Gremory Estate. An intricate, crimson magic circle materialized on the floor of Naruto's floor, and a split second later, Naruto appeared in the middle of the circle. Not a second later, he collapsed on one knee, still fatigued from his spar with Sairaorg. With inhuman willpower, Naruto pulled himself up and practically threw himself into his bathroom. He quickly stripped out of his dirty clothes, unceremoniously throwing them into a random corner. With his body exposed, he quickly made his way past the toilet and sink and entered the shower. Naruto's hands gripped the handle and turned it, allowing the heated water to cover him like a warm blanket. Now in a comfortable position, Naruto mused over his thoughts as his normally spiky hair flattened under the water. He was growing stronger, he was sure of it. Standing at a height of 57 inches, he was an inch taller than the average height for 11-year-olds. His muscles have grown even larger, though Sairaorg had him beat in that department. Sairaorg. They were definitely rivals, as both strove to best each other in each spar with vigor and enthusiasm. But were they friends? Naruto certainly thought so. They joked around and shared their various problems and insecurities. If that didn't mean they were friends, what did? He tapped his chin with his finger as the showerhead continuously sprayed hot water upon him. Enough about Sairaorg. Whether we're friends or not isn't the pressing matter. No, the problem is me finding my ace. Naruto was growing frustrated with each passing moment. Even with the massive library in the household, Naruto was unable to develop his calling card. One of Naruto's stepping goals was to make a name for himself in the underworld. He didn't want to remain a brother of Lucifer, or a mistake as Venelana frequently called him. Not that he cared what Venelana thought about him. Like Sairaorg, who gained the name of Crimson-Haired Prince of Destruction, Naruto desperately wanted a moniker of his own. He obviously couldn't give himself a nickname. He needed others to witness his power and spread the news of his power. From there on, people would give him a title he'd be known by. But he couldn't do that without something special. Something that would absolutely stun every. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts and looked up at his hands. His hair was already soaked, along with the rest of his body. Naruto slowly smiled and then chuckled in a low voice. He had gotten really good at that, letting his mind wander while his body would take care of the more menial tasks. It saved so much time and let him research all about his elemental attacks and the endless possibilities of applying them to. Naruto chuckled again. There he went again, all lost in his thoughts. Deciding to speed all this up, Naruto quickly scrubbed himself clean and rinsed himself with the water. The handle soundlessly turned to the right, and the water flow ceased. With droplets of water rolling off his slim yet muscled body, Naruto stepped out of the shower and dried himself. Click. The lights went off and Naruto stepped out of the bathroom. It was nearly 11 p.m., and he could only sigh in disappointment. He just had to get all caught up with Sairaorg, and now he'd have to sacrifice precious hours of sleep. He made his way to the bed and promptly fell on the silky blankets. It was only a matter of time before he fell asleep. As Naruto's vision darkened, he faintly heard an ominous voice in his head. Soon. 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 With these words chanted in an almost ritualistic manner, Naruto tried waking himself back up, but his own body succumbed, as it had been pushed beyond the natural limits. Soon. DxD. Light faintly streamed through the room's single circular window. The blinds tried blocking it to let Naruto rest in his peaceful slumber, but it was a futile attempt. The rays of luminescence struck the young devil's eyelids and Naruto was forced to wake up. Naruto mumbled under his breath, visibly confused for some reason. I actually woke up before the alarm clock. To avoid any unnecessary noise and pain, he quickly made his way to the clock. In big, red numbers, they read 6 o'clock. Glancing at it for a second, Naruto made sure to hit snooze. He then looked down at his hands, feeling a brief rush of adrenaline, despite the strenuous workout he participated in yesterday. Am I really this nervous? He quickly clenched his hands in an attempt to strengthen his resolve. Besides, I have other things to worry about, like that voice in my head last night. Just what the hell was that? Pushing aside his worries, for now, Naruto quickly freshened himself and found himself sitting at his desk, looking over his notes, again. He just couldn't help himself. He was so close to using the element lightning for his fighting style. He had an incomplete version of this new mode and theoretically, it would enhance his speed and reflexes. With it, he would be able to match Sairaorg's speed and possibly exceed it. Unfortunately for Naruto, the technique presented problems on its own. As it involved shrouding his entire body with pure voltage, the danger of permanently damaging his nerves was present. His 10-year-old body just wasn't ready for that. It didn't stop Naruto, as he attempted to prepare his body by continuously shocking himself with low amounts of voltage. It didn't stop there, as the danger isn't the only problem. Even if Naruto had a body sturdy enough to handle and contain the lightning, it would take around 30 seconds to prepare the magical circles and fire lightning out of them. After sparring with Sairaorg more than a couple of times, Naruto realized that 30 seconds was much longer than you'd think it'd be in the heat of a battle. Well, one step at a time. He'd have to be able to hold the lightning in the first place. Small magic circles appeared on the ceiling and shot thin streaks of lightning at Naruto. Multiple sparks of voltage crackled and popped before fizzling out in the air. Still sitting on his chair, Naruto convulsed and writhed in pain, before slamming his hand, dissipating the magic circles and lightning. Fucking shit. Naruto panted and paused to catch his breath. Few stray sparks danced around his body as he continued to suck up air. Even though the pain was unbearable, he continued. Lightning crackled as Naruto suffered and agonized silently. DxD. It was time. Thankfully, Naruto was observant enough to change out of his blackened clothes into new ones. Still, no matter how much cologne he sprayed upon himself, the smell of ozone lingered around him. He ditched the cologne idea and showered after taking a sniff and getting a dizzying scent of confusion. Now, dressed in black slacks, a crisp, white, button-down shirt, and a pair of black dress shoes, Naruto cast the teleportation spell. Normally, he would don sweatpants, a t-shirt, and sneakers, but he knew Grafia would flay him alive if he dressed like that and appeared in front of the Ajuka Beelzebub. Naruto! Sairaorg tried to smile and greet him in a friendly tone. Exciting day, isn't it? How are you feeling? Sairaorg wanted to like Naruto. He really did. But there was just something about the boy that set off his instincts. And his instincts were never wrong. Naruto nodded. I'm fine. Sairaorg could only sweat drop at Naruto's short response. Shortly after, another magic circle appeared on the ground, with the Gremory emblem. Standing inside was Rias Gremory. An admittedly beautiful girl with crimson hair but spoiled, nonetheless. As far as Naruto was concerned, she never trained her body or magic unless forced to by her parents. Anime marathons, presents from her older brother, and Japanese culture were the only things that made up Rias's lifestyle. In Naruto's book, she was a failure. A girl that took advantage of her family's wealth and never pushed her limits. Of course, in reality, she was viewed as the beloved princess of the Gremory clan. Bullshit. Rias! Surzex was noticeably happier and much more enthusiastic with his greeting, as he crushed his sister with a hug and squeezed the life out of her. She can't breathe. Rias choked and pounded on her brother's back with all her might. Rias, my cute little sister, are you okay? Where's your boo-boos? Don't worry, your brother will kiss them and make the pain go away. Surzex, now panicked, was a second away from calling a medic. I'm fine. Rias dusted herself off and blushed in embarrassment. Honestly, do you have to act this way all the time? She crossed her arms and tapped her foot. Surzex whined. But Ria. Are we going to leave, or what? Naruto interrupted. I don't know about her, but I'd like to receive my peerage set as soon as possible. Both Surzex and Rias were both slightly shocked by Naruto's slight impatience. Normally, he was much more reserved and quiet. Surzex coughed. Right. Well, let's hop in the carriage and get moving. All three siblings climbed in the awaiting vehicle and found that there was much more room than needed, at least, that was the case for Naruto. Once inside and settled, Naruto asked why can't we just teleport to Ajuka, Surzex? Well, my cute little brother, it's often considered rude to just pop into other people's houses. Surzex chided while wagging his finger. But isn't he a friend of yours? Do formalities matter that much when you're at that stage of friendship? Naruto countered. True, but why would I squander an opportunity to showcase my dear siblings? Both Rias and Naruto's sweat dropped at the stupidity of that statement. He could showcase them without the use of the carriage. Besides, what did he mean by showcase? Naruto certainly didn't like the idea of being a trophy to show off. Well, there was no point in arguing with Surzex now. For a Siscon, he was really stubborn when he put his mind to it. While Surzex continued to bother Rias by asking her to play with him, Naruto closed out all the background noises and sunk into his thoughts. Though he didn't show it on the outside, his lightning problem was really starting to irk him. Naruto thought and thought and thought, and before he knew it, they had arrived. Naruto! Naruto! For Mao's sake, what? Naruto snapped irritably. Surzex had a hurt expression on his face. I was just letting you know that we arrived. Are you okay? You were spacing out there. Okay, maybe he was a little too harsh there. I'm fine, Naruto muttered. Sorry for yelling at you. Surzex's expression shifted faster than Naruto could yell ramen. Oh, my cute little brother apologized. Is he warming up to me? Surzex squealed in a high tone that didn't suit him at all. Naruto's eyes twitched as he held in the urge to facepalm. How could one man be so unbearable? How did Grafia deal with this mockery of a Mao? Why did she marry him in the first place? Can we just go? Surzex pouted, which was something Naruto hoped to never see again. It just didn't look right on his older brother. Follow your big brother. Surzex walked towards a mansion and the doors immediately opened, as if Ajuka knew they were going to be there. Naruto looked at the handsome, green-haired man as he greeted and welcomed them into his mansion. The first thing Naruto noticed was an aura that he could only describe as mysterious. Naruto pushed these observations to the side and instead focused on what he knew of the evil peace system. He knew a peerage presented a number of responsibilities and thus prepared accordingly. Apparently, the evil pieces were created by Ajuka Beelzebub to help replenish the number of devils after the Great War. They were modeled after chess pieces and each different piece had its unique boost. Knights were worth 3 pawns and gained increased speed and mobility. Bishops were also worth 3 pawns but gained enhanced magical abilities which could be used to conjure up a multitude of spells. Rooks were worth 5 pawns as they gained superhuman strength, leading to high offense and defense. Pawns were able to be promoted into a queen, rook, knight, or bishop in enemy territory or with the permission of their king. Queens, being worth 9 pawns, possessed all the characteristics of rooks, knights, and bishops, making them the most balanced piece as well as the most powerful. Naruto had planned out for this as well. See, each piece, besides the queen, had their weaknesses. First, pawns don't gain significant boosts besides the ones given by being a reincarnated devil, enhanced strength, night vision, language. Knights weren't sturdy and a well-placed hit to the legs would take them out. Bishops were often vulnerable to physical attacks if she exhausted their reserves or if the opponent slipped under the guard. Rooks were more balanced compared to the previous 3 pieces, but they were slow. Besides, being durable did not equate to being indestructible. Once Naruto had read up on their strengths and weaknesses, he made sure to remember that his peerages would not have those weaknesses. His knights would be able to tank a couple of hits. His bishops would learn physical combat and work on their physical conditioning. His rooks would be fast and have a few magical spells in their arsenal. His pawns? He would put them through hellish training. He would break them down with sadistic glee and then put them back together as warriors. Okay, maybe he wouldn't break them down. But needless to say, training would still be very, very hard. He would make sure of that. But above all, his peerage wouldn't be a peerage. It would be a group or an organization. His pieces wouldn't be servants. They would be his comrades, his friends. And he would never, ever force someone into his peerage if he could help it. If they were strong and held plenty of potential, he would follow them around and annoy them about it. But he wouldn't force any decisions. Naruto was so absorbed in his thoughts that he failed to notice that Rias had already received her pieces. Ending now for Naruto. Ajuka smiled at the young devil and what he hoped was a charming, dazzling grin. Naruto stepped forward and laid his hands on the replacement king piece. After a brief period, his pieces emerged and Naruto couldn't help but gasp. They were beautiful. Instead of the crimson veined pieces Rias had, he had completely different ones. They were deep blue with flecks of red-orange in random places. Pure white shone through several veins, as each piece practically pulsed power. Naruto couldn't help but notice that the white veins resembled bolts of lightning. If one looked even closer, they would see a few abnormalities. Some of his pieces were different in shape and Ajuka took great pleasure in pointing that out. It looks like you have a mutated queen, rook, and knight piece. Congratulations, not many devils have even one mutated piece. Naruto smiled. Eat that, Sairaorg. He followed Surzex out of the mansion and the three siblings stepped into a teleportation circle. Everything was going according to his plan. DxD. As soon as Naruto's feet touched the ground again, he turned to Surzex. There was something he had to tell him. Brother. Surzex turned to Naruto, who had an unreadable look on his face. I wish to leave. That was not what Surzex anticipated to hear. See, can you repeat that? I don't think I heard that correctly. Just to make sure, he dug a finger into his ear to remove any excess wax, an action that greatly disgusted Naruto. I'm leaving, Naruto announced. I've been planning this for months, so you can't stop or talk me out of this. With or without your permission, I'm leaving. Surzex gaped at what Naruto was saying. He was only 10 years old, for Mao's sake. Naruto continued. I know you think I'm just a 10-year-old. How did Naruto know what he was thinking about? But I'll try to stay out of trouble. I'm not an idiot. Naruto finished and looked at Surzex expectantly. Well, I suppose it's alright. Great. See ya. Naruto drew his own teleportation circle and promptly vanished. Wait. Surzex had his arms outstretched, as he was expecting a hug from his brother. How dare he? Humph. He was going to have to hug Rias even more now. DxD. Naruto's sweat dropped at how easy it was to convince Surzex to let him go. The fewer words he had to use to convince him, the better. Being the organized devil he was, Naruto had already packed his stuff up. His notes were all inside a thick folder, and he had a bag full of food and clothes. Next to the bag was a personal invention of Naruto. He had made a crude device that would point to a direction that emanated the most magical energy, whether it was yokai, holy, or demonic. He stuffed his folder into the bag before slipping his arms into the straps. He grabbed his device and quickly made another teleportation circle. He had one last stop. DxD. Thunderous cracks echoed in the training ground. Sairaorg was, of course, training. There was no way he could let his blasted rival get stronger than him. Speaking of said rival, Naruto appeared in a magic circle with a backpack on his back. Sairaorg grinned. Naruto. Trying to spy on my moves? Naruto ignored his verbal jab and stated, I'm leaving. Sairaorg's good-natured smile fell off his face upon hearing those words. He was leaving. Sairaorg had so many questions to ask but couldn't get any words out of his mouth. Naruto continued his reasoning. To search for my peerage members, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave the underworld. My gut is telling me that I'll find my members there. Besides, I want to explore places. I want to see something other than the purple sky and greenery. I want to be free. Sairaorg recovered from his shock and shook his head. I can't talk you out of this, can I? Nope. Then let me tell you something. A smile crept back onto Sairaorg's face. You better keep up your training. After all, it'd be super lame if my rival became a weakling. Naruto faintly smiled and extended his arm for a handshake. The same goes for you. Sairaorg took his hand. In both of their minds, they had the same thought. I'm gonna miss him. Time skipped 6 months later. Naruto was very irritated. He knew searching for his future comrades would take time, but he didn't realize the sheer effort it took to recruit a member with actual potential. Of course, Naruto could just take a random human off the streets and train him, but that was the same as giving up. And Naruto did not give up. Fortunately for Naruto, he recently had a stroke of good luck and found multiple, linked cases that potentially pointed to a new member. According to eyewitnesses, a nearby village in the forest was completely frozen solid with only one girl left, as a survivor. People dismissed it as a weather abnormality, as many humans were discouraged from entering the forest in the first place due to rumors of roaming bears. As if bears were going to stop him. Naruto stealthily made his way through the forest, holding a map in one hand and his tracking device in the other. So far, the device pointed in the direction of the village. He was close, he could feel it. As he caught a glimpse of his reflection, he quickly realized that there was ice. The trees nearby were all coated with ice, and on top of the ground was a light sheen of snow. He crumpled his map with one hand and shoved it in his right pocket. He then looked down at the device and confirmed that he was going in the right way. Blood. He smelled blood. Naruto quickened his pace, broke through the branches, and abruptly stopped before the gruesome sight. So many corpses. There were around 20 human corpses frozen solid, and the ice underneath was pink, clearly stained with blood. Walking forward, Naruto could see a mutilated body, riddled with gaping holes. He could see the pained expression frozen on the now dead man's face. If that wasn't disgusting enough, Naruto had a good look at his intestines and organs. Naruto had to close his eyes and hold back a heave. Who, or rather what, had done this? With his eyes still closed, he heard the faint sound of crying. He quickly and skillfully made his way through the various bodies and deduced that the crying sound was coming from the inside of the house. Naruto tried opening the door quietly, but much to his displeasure, the door creaked loudly and alerted the girl of his presence. Damn it! My cover is blow. Before Naruto could finish that thought, he was violently thrown out with an icy blast of wind. He was sent tumbling and rolling on the cold ground. PFT. Naruto quickly got up and instinctively put up a barrier. It saved his life. A freaking pillar of ice collided with the barrier, and Naruto had to support it with 3 more shielding spells. Through the cloud of snow, Naruto saw a girl around his age with long, light blue hair and matching blue eyes. She had tattered clothing that thankfully covered her lady parts, and had a blue scarf around her neck. Before Naruto could even recollect his thoughts, she unleashed a flurry of razor-sharp icicles. Reacting quickly with a wave of his hands, Naruto simultaneously dropped his barrier and unleashed a wave of fire from a magic circle. The icicles were quickly consumed, but his elemental attack was quickly pushed back by an icy gale. Wait! I think we got off on the wrong foot. Naruto was forced to dodge yet another barrage of icicles. This makes everything so much harder. I have to somehow counteract her attacks without any of my large-scale spells. After all, I don't want to kill her. But at the same time, I have to convince her to stop attacking me. How should I proceed? The ice slowly crept across the ground, as the girl's aura got more and more noticeable. Thankfully, Naruto wasn't an amateur and placed a wide barrier around the village to prevent any outside interference. The girl quietly asked him, "Why do you humans persist in taking my powers?" Naruto put his hands up, trying to clear up the misunderstanding. "I'm not even hum." "Shut up." Her gaze looked absolutely murderous. "You lying humans came into my village, killed my mom, and you have the audacity to attack me while I'm grieving?" Her power spiked to unbelievable levels as she released a small-scale blizzard in his direction. While thankfully not the size of an actual storm, it was still extremely powerful, as it easily overwhelmed his fire-wind combination attack. Thousands of ice particles and the biting wind stung Naruto's skin and practically threw him away into the trees. Naruto slammed into a trunk before widening his eyes and ducking. Where his head once was a gaping hole. He quickly rolled to the side and summoned his magic circles once more. Just in the nick of time, several fiery projectiles in the shape of dragons barely made it out of the circle before colliding with her ice projectiles. This continued on for a bit, as he continued to roll side to side but was held on the defensive, as his opponent released attack after attack with no sign of fatigue. I have to go all out. At this point, it's about survival. Naruto grimly acknowledged the girl's power and started it. Godspeed! It still wasn't complete, but Naruto underwent a harsh training regime that developed his body and lightning enough to use the technique in battle. A circle appeared underneath Naruto, and another materialized above his head. Pure blue-white voltage was released from both circles and enveloped him in a shroud of lightning. Luckily for him, the girl was surprised by the turn of events, as she couldn't come up with a reason why he was electrocuting himself. After 30 seconds, both circles disappeared and Naruto fell on both knees. Why? Why would you do something as stupid as that? Naruto looked up and the girl gasped. His normal cerulean blue eyes seemed to be filled with electricity, and his spiky hair became even more untamed than before. Small bolts of lightning seemed to flicker around his whole body. He was dangerous. She could sense some kind of change, but she couldn't tell what it did to him. No matter, she would freeze him and crush his head like a grape. Wait. Where was he? She involuntarily shivered and whirled around, trying to get a glimpse of the redhead. Where was he? Russell. There. She let loose some of her powers and the plants in that area froze and then shattered. Her hair was now flicking around from the amount of energy she was releasing. In a piercing scream, she released thousands of ice needles in all directions. Clink, clink, clink. She turned around just to see Naruto drop her frozen needles on the icy ground. He's fast. She blinked and suddenly he wasn't there anymore. Although she couldn't see him, she instantly knew that he was behind him. In a split second, her very life flashed before her eyes as she braced for a killing blow. Instead, she felt his arms loop around her stomach and he pulled her into a hug. In response to this heartwarming gesture, she started trembling and sobs erupted out of her mouth. The pair stood there, the girl crying and the boy silently mourning for her dead parents. As Naruto held the girl in his arms, she made no attempt to get out of the embrace. She was tired. She was tired of these intruders that came out of nowhere, ransacked her village, and killed her parents when she refused to go with them. She missed her parents. She missed their hugs, kisses, and goodnight stories. She missed going with her mother to gather herbs and nuts. She missed her study sessions with her father, which always ended with a good-natured smooch on her head. She missed love. So when her opponent, in a surprising turn of events, hugged her, her will broke down. Despite her ruthless, inhuman attacks she unleashed upon the trespassers, she was still a 10-year-old. A 10-year that craved warmth. Let's go somewhere else and talk. A soft, warm voice reached her ears and despite her initial aggressive reaction, she steadily agreed. Besides, she was cold, hungry, and sleepy. She didn't think she would last very long without a long, hot shower. Not to mention the smell of the dead bodies. So without any resistance, she let the boy pull her around and watched as he cast a red circle on the snow-covered ground. Before she could change her mind or even let out even a squeak, they vanished. DXD. The girl let out an eep as they reappeared in what she thought was his home. It looked spacious enough with a queen bed pressed up against the middle of the left wall. Gray curtains fully covered the windows, not letting a single ray of light in. Not that it was needed, as the 2 lamps on the sides of the bed, and a mini chandelier more than made up for the lack of natural luminescence. Well, the bathroom is on the right corner, near the windows. I'll be right back with fresh clothes, so just make yourself comfortable. We'll talk when I get back. Naruto gave her what he thought was a reassuring pat on the back and stepped back to cast his spell. Wait. Naruto stopped his spell and looked up expectantly. What's your name? Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki. He disappeared, leaving the girl to mull over her thoughts and newly acquired knowledge. Naruto Uzumaki, that's a nice name. Wait, doesn't it mean fish cake? DXD. Naruto was never doing that again. Shopping for girls' clothes was so humiliating and just a morbid experience in general. Just enduring the gaping, disgusted looks from the passing shoppers as they all heard his requests was an unpleasant obstacle he had to go through. Some even had to gall to whisper and gossip to each other whether he was a molester. A molester? He was 10 years old for Mao's sake. Thankfully, a quick memory spell turned their attention to the products they were originally looking for. Although no spells in his arsenal could help him decide what kind of panties to buy. Ditching all attempts to think about what kind of clothes would suit her the best, Naruto blindly grabbed a stack of shirts, pants, shorts, and underwear, before using a memory spell to get the hell out of there. Once out of the shop, he quickly made his way to an alley, made sure no one was looking and teleported back to his hotel room. Just to see a certain naked, blue-haired girl coming out of the bathroom. EP. DXD. After repeated attempts on his life, the girl finally calmed down and got dressed. Though she still sneaked a couple of glances to make sure he wasn't peeking. Naruto let out a sigh of relief once it seemed the girl wasn't going to be conjuring any ice spears. It was hard enough dodging the attacks and trying to explain the situation with a large stack of clothes in his hands. He was going to have to use a mind-altering spell to explain the various holes in the once unblemished, pristine white walls. So, what's your name? Isdeath. The now identified Isdeath looked at him warily and her eyes flashed with a hint of malice, daring him to try anything. Alright, Isdeath. First off, I understand your caution and wariness around me. After all, it wouldn't make sense to trust anyone after your parents' death. Isdeath stiffened at the reminder of what she had lost but didn't lash out. But I'm not going to hurt you. I know words don't mean much compared to actions, so if there's anything I could do to get you to trust them. Isdeath quickly interrupted him. You said you wanted to talk to me. You've been nice enough to me so far, so I'll hear you out. Naruto smiled at that, but what she said next took his initial excitement away. But once you finish, I'll be leaving immediately. Naruto kept his faint smile on his face as he tried his best to accommodate her with food and water. He walked over to his backpack, still speaking fair enough, but why don't we talk over dinner? At the mention of dinner, Estetha's stomach grumbled and a slight blush made its way onto her porcelain white skin. Naruto chuckled at that and pulled out 2 apples and unwrapped a sandwich for her to eat. He made his way over to her and placed them next to her. She conveyed a silent thank you through her eyes and started munching on the fruit. Where to start? Naruto mused and then brightened up. Well, I'll explain what I am, but you have to promise you won't start throwing ice attacks at my face again. It's a touchy subject, to say the least. Estetha looked up, visibly confused, but agreed to his demands. The most important thing is that I'm a devil. As Estetha stiffened and readied her hands to resume her attacks, Naruto tried waving her down and quickly reassured her, it's not like I eat babies or sacrifice virgins. I'm relatively harmless. Estetha stared at him, remembering his wizard-like powers, and blinked. Point taken. But I didn't kill you when I had an opening. That has to count for something, right? Naruto looked at her hopefully, and silently begged her to not attack him. Thankfully, she didn't. He took that as a sign to continue. To understand why I'm here in the first place, I have to give you a history lesson. Naruto cleared his throat and looked up to make sure Estetha was paying some sort of attention. She was. Sort of. There are 3 factions that have been stuck in a 3-way deadlock: angels, fallen angels, and of course, the devils. My race, the devils, have 2 enemies, them being the angels and fallen angels. The fallen angels are angels that have fallen from grace and, unlike their former comrades, have black wings. Angels have white wings and have one mission: destroy the devils and the fallen. Well, they might have some other side mission of spreading God's word or something like that. Estetha focused on her food but kept an ear out for any useful information. In a war that took place years ago, both devils and the fallen took a steep decline in their respective populations. Well, so did the angels, but I'm pretty sure God can create more. Anyways, luckily for us, a genius known as Ajuka managed to come up with a system based on chess, known as the evil piece system. Even he doesn't know the full capabilities of it, as it's constantly evolving and mutating, but essentially, it allows us to reincarnate other beings as devils. She froze mid-bite into her sandwich. Was he going to force her into being a devil? Don't worry, I'm not going to force you into my peerage. I'm not that kind of person. Naruto smiled warmly at her, and she resumed eating her meal. For a young devil like me, I can participate in something known as raiding games and rise in terms of power, wealth, and fame. Though I'm not that kind of person, he mumbled the last words under his breath, but Estetha heard them. In the peerage system, there are various pieces: queen, knight, bishop, rook, and pawn, the queen being the strongest and the pawn being the weakest. Naruto quickly added, but that doesn't mean pawns are useless, nor does it mean queens are without weakness. With smart tactics and training, a single pawn can take down a queen. Estetha quickly interrupted, the sandwich long gone and impatient with the long lecture. That's great and all, but what does it have to do with me? Naruto blinked. He thought his talk about the peerage system made his intentions blatantly clear. My goal is to recruit you and have you join me as my queen, Naruto announced. He quickly focused his attention on her face, trying to gauge her reaction. Any questions? Estetha nodded slowly. I have 2 actually. First, why can't devils reproduce normally? Why is the peerage system necessary to repopulate the devil population? That's a good question. Devils actually have a really low fertility rate, so unlike humans, they require decades to even get a single child. Then it dawned on him. Wait a minute, you know? Estetha stared at him unflinchingly. What are you talking about? Like, did you get the talk? Is that really important? Anyways, Naruto cleared his throat. You said you had another question? Estetha fidgeted nervously before she asked. Earlier, you said you're not that kind of person. What did you mean by that? Naruto's face darkened and Estetha quickly deduced that she had reached a touchy subject. She quickly tried to retract her question, but Naruto gestured for her to stop. It's fine, everyone has a driving force, some kind of motivation to keep pushing their limits. Usually it's money, fame, or women. But I'm not like that. Naruto sighed. My stepmother called me a mistake. Obviously, I don't believe her, nor do I consider myself a failure. But Naruto clenched his fists. I want to prove her wrong. I want to show her my strength, and to do that, I need help. I'm not an arrogant jerkwad that thinks I can do everything by myself. That's why I'm here in the first place. Estetha was stunned. His practically oozed determination, and she found herself believing his words. So Estetha, will you join my peerage? She hesitated. She knew instinctively that Naruto was a kind and benevolent person. He wasn't the type to abandon her or treat her like dirt. At the same time, she valued her humanity and freedom. I'll think about it. Naruto maintained a friendly face and shrugged. To be honest, I wasn't expecting you to accept. After all, this is a life-changing decision. However, I can't let you go after that show of power. Now that you've showcased your power, you'll be a target. I can train you, make you stronger so you won't lose your life. Do you accept? This time, there was no hesitation, only a strong resolve to grow stronger. For her village. For her parents. For herself. I do. Time skipped 6 months later. It was finally time. After training, eating, and laughing together, Death finally accepted his offer to join his peerage. Just thinking about it made Naruto immensely happy. Giddy even. Are you ready? Naruto had his chess pieces out in the open, ready to reincarnate Death as his queen. Death smiled at him. I am. No time better than the present, Naruto muttered and started the process. I, Naruto Uzumaki Gremory, command you to join me as a comrade. Burn bright with your will to triumph and become my queen. In a sudden blinding light, Death was born anew. Once the light died down, Death observed her new changes. The first thing she noticed was her newfound strength, both physical and magical. She felt like she could do anything. Not only that, after a couple of attempts, she also discovered wings. She could fly. If that wasn't the coolest thing ever! Naruto's explanations of the other benefits she would receive fell on deaf ears. She mentally commanded her wings to appear and bat-like wings shot out of her back. Are you even listening to me? Naruto deadpanned, as he was amused with her antics. She continued to ignore him, and he could only sweat drop at the scene. Why was it that his queen ignored his words? Death suddenly smiled and took off into the air. Wait. If you do that, Naruto realized that his words would only be ignored again and focused purely on erecting a barrier to make sure other faction members wouldn't be alerted. Thankfully, they were currently in a green field with no sign of humanity for miles. Still, with Death's now boosted reserves, a decent sensor would easily pick up her magic signature. With his shielding spell complete, Naruto quickly flew in pursuit of his newest member. His newest comrade. His friend. DxD. With Death recovering from her impromptu test flight, Naruto sat down and meditated. It was something he picked up while traveling with Death. While it didn't bolster his reserves or grant him powers, he greatly enjoyed the peace it created. Unfortunately for him, that same peace was soon disturbed. His eyes opened quickly. Naruto glanced over to Death, who had a grim expression on her face. You felt it too? Yup. The two companions quickly took to flight again. They both felt a slight fluctuation in the natural order of the world. It was a barrier spiel being set up. Whether it was a fellow devil or the accursed Gregory, it was in their best interest to investigate the situation. Though Naruto thought he had sensed the slightest amount of holy energy. If he wasn't in his meditative position, he never would have noticed it. Thankfully, being in a still position helped him concentrate on his surroundings. Wind furiously blew past their faces as air resistance didn't seem to exist against their furiously beating wings. The land was really beautiful, as there were various flower patches in the natural valley. The air was fresh and free of any pollutants. Had there been more time, Naruto would have sat and stretched his legs, basking in the sunlight without a care in the world. He was right. Up ahead of them, there was a slight shimmer in the air, extending down to the ground, and curving overhead, making a dome-like sphere. Stand back. Naruto raised his hands, prepared to destroy the barrier. Lightning Beast Chase. As Naruto's attack commenced, he was briefly reminded of his encounter with Sairaorg. In their first encounter, Naruto had summoned 4 homing, lightning dragons to paralyze his friend. Those attacks had been small back then. Granted, he was in his room and thus was deterred from using his large-scale lightning attacks. Still, his newly evolved blitz was exponentially stronger, faster, and bigger. The dome cracked before giving way to the onslaught. There, Naruto quickly observed the situation. 1, 2, 3, 15 warriors? I'm not entirely sure what they are, but they're dressed in priest-like clothes and armed with holy water and crosses. There's some kind of exorcist group. And who's the girl in the back? She has elongated fangs and I'm sensing some dark energy from her. She has to be a vampire, but at the same time that necklace of hers is radiating powerful energy. A sacred gear? But that means she's half vampire and half human. After all, only humans can wield sacred gears. As these thoughts ran through Naruto's mind, the exorcists quickly took note of his presence and drew their swords. Who are you and what are your intentions? Naruto shouted, all the while readying to activate Godspeed. After putting himself through hell, it was nearly complete. Now, it only required around 10 seconds to activate. While it may have been slight overkill to use this technique right from the start, he had no intention of underestimating his opponents. Who are we? A harsh guttural voice came from the group. You filthy devils may know as the Knight Templars. At the sound of that, Naruto gasped while his death looked over, confused. As for our intentions, a large man, possibly the leader of the group, stepped up. We intend to kill you for your transgressions against our lord. What transgressions? Existing. With that, Naruto quickly activated his circles and the electricity was hungrily absorbed by his body. His death pushed them back with an icy gale, and from the ground, vicious-looking ice spikes erupted, intending to impale the self-proclaimed Templars. 9-10. A quick burst of blue-white aura pushed both friend and foe back. Naruto's hair was no longer red, as the increasing amounts of voltage changed his appearance. No longer a redhead, his hair was seemingly transparent with blue flickers lining the sides of each strand. His veins, while still red, glowed ethereally from time to time. They're well trained, Naruto noted. To avoid Estetha's attacks is no small feat, however. We'll see if they can match my speed. They couldn't. Voltage crackled all around them as Naruto seemingly disappeared and reappeared in front of the leader. With a mighty punch, the so-called leader was sent flying and tumbling to the ground. Supported by Estetha's icicles and spears, the rest of the soldiers were easy pickings. Naruto rushed from enemy to enemy, landing a barrage of punches and kicks that couldn't be avoided, never mind seen. The damper wasn't just sitting and twiddling her thumbs, as she displayed her inhuman strength. Punching one of the soldiers, with a sickening crack, his jaw snapped and, like his leader, was sent elsewhere. With the battle finished, Naruto and his death visibly relaxed, leaving a chance for the still-alive leader. Sword in hand, the man lunged for a cheap shot from Naruto's behind, seeing an opportunity to bring him down. Unbeknownst to him, Naruto sensed his ill intentions from a mile away. Leaning to the side easily, the man could only let momentum take its course. He was now parallel to the ground and left open to a counterattack. The leader could only pray that his lord would save him. Unfortunately for him, Naruto did not pull any punches, something his death found out the hard way. Naruto brought his lightning-infused elbow into his spine, and it snapped like a twig. Naruto dusted off his hands and thought about what to do. Well, more information never hurts anybody, so. At this, his death perked up. He looked over at her, and could only cringe at her bloodthirsty grin and sadistic appearance. Never in a million years could he have guessed that the blue-haired girl he took in as a peerage member enjoyed seeing others in pain. At least she did her job well. Secure him, Naruto commanded, and his death was happy to comply. She quickly bound the groaning leader's hands and legs while Naruto walked over to the now brooding damper. What do you want? A cold, arrogant voice cut Naruto off before he could even speak. Look, you heard the man. He wants to exterminate all supernatural creatures, leaving only humans. It's in our best interest to work together, so how about it? Naruto proposed. She glanced at him suspiciously before inquiring, how am I supposed to trust you? Naruto was now frustrated. He was hungry and strained after the prolonged use of Godspeed. What he needed right now was a nice, hot meal and a bed to sleep on. Then we'll talk here. He threw his hands up. I need information quickly. If the man was serious about them being Templars, the situation might be worse than I thought. She continued to look at him, eyeing him with caution before sighing. Fine. What do you want to know? Name, why they were chasing you, and why you hate them so much. The damper looked at him strangely before answering, Mocha Akashiya. They chased me because I'm a damper. They said something about me blurring the lines between humanity and Yukai. As for why I hate them, she scoffed, they were trying to kill me. Do I need a better reason? Naruto thought over her answers. So she was a damper. But something didn't sit right with him. No, he answered, but I see something in your eyes. A wave of deep, smoldering anger that's begging to be released. You truly hate them, not just because they tried killing you. You hold some kind of grudge against them because of something they did. Mocha's face darkened, only confirming his suspicions. What did they do? She haughtily threw her silver hair back and stared at him with her blood-red eyes. Maybe I like hurting them, like that girl over there. He looked over to his death, and saw her laughing while snapping his fingers one by one. She couldn't hold her inner nature back and started her session early. Not that Naruto minded. They were on a tight schedule and time was something they did not have. Maybe, but I didn't sense any joy when you snapped that man's jaw. Naruto continued, besides I sensed the bitterness and frustration coming off of you. So tell me, what did they do? Mocha remained silent, visibly disturbed with Naruto's accurate deduction. She opened her mouth, prepared to exchange information. Before I answer you, I want you to answer me this. What do you mean by sensing my bitterness and frustration? Naruto grinned. I have no idea. To this, Mocha could only facepalm. It was the truth. 2 months ago, Naruto realized that he could sense energies radiating from others. After meditating and stretching his sensor abilities, he had somehow evolved this skill. So, Mocha was quiet for a few more seconds before sharing her story. The most important thing to understand about us damn peers is that we're looked down on by vampires. They dismiss us because we have so-called weak blood running through our veins. She was undeniably agitated by her race's thinking. So my mother kicked me out of the household. For a while, I was alone, all by myself. I had no one to turn to, no one to talk to. Eventually, I found some people. She smiled. They were the oddest group I've ever seen in my life. A short blonde male that constantly groped a beautiful silver-haired woman. A spiky black-haired boy that had a much more reserved relationship with a fellow damper. Her smile vanished and a livid frown took its place. They were taken by the so-called templars. They held them off while I escaped. That's why I hate them. Because they took my only family away from me. Tears began to fall down her face as she tightly gripped the edge of her shirt. He made his decision. We'll help you. Naruto piped up. What? I said we'll help you. You're clearly not lying and our interests overlap. I want to get rid of the Templars and you want to save your friends. What's the saying? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Naruto outstretched his arm, intending on sealing this promise with a handshake. You in? Mocha took his hand. What's your name? Naruto was so embarrassed. How did he forget to introduce himself? He even asked for her name, and he didn't give his own? Naruto Uzumaki. He motioned for her to follow him. Come on. Let's regroup and find out what his death learned. Naruto Uzumaki, huh? What a weird guy. She laughed in relief before following him. A blurred figure stood in front of him. Who was he? Was it a demon? Possibly a fallen? Zacharias couldn't tell. White-hot pain crawled throughout his body, spreading from vein to vein and organ to organ. The sensory receptors in his skin were overworked from telling his brain that something was terribly wrong. Of course, was something wrong? Even if he couldn't feel the needle-like agony piercing his very soul, he could still see that his body was deformed beyond recognition. Where his fingers once were remained bloody stumps that were wrapped with gauze to stop blood loss. His toenails were viciously ripped out, and the sensitive tissue underneath the keratin was sprayed with salt. The plasma cells and platelets that made up the bare essential known as blood steadily leaked out of his body. In short, the blue-haired girl really did a number on him. He had no idea who trained her in the art of torture, but she was clearly an expert. She knew all the non-lethal places to break or stab and made sure that he didn't lose too much blood. He had begged her to kill him and let death take him away with her sweet embrace, but she dismissed him like trash. No, he was worse than trash. After all, he gave up valuable information that would prove to be useful in what he assumed to be their attempt to bring the Templars down. Geez, is death really went overboard with you? The figure exclaimed, visibly horrified at her work. Not that Zacharias could see his expression. Then, everything went black. DXD? Alright, listen up cause I'm only going to say this once. Once Mocha finished making a temporary alliance with Naruto, they set up camp in the middle of the valley. Naruto had placed several barrier spells along with a system that would detect and alert them of any trespassers. Even with the intricate security system, they agreed upon taking shifts. His death was kind enough to gather some intel, so I think I have a working theory about this organization. Naruto tapped his chin and double-checked to see if he had the girl's attention. Thankfully, his death knew when the situation was serious and Mocha was dead set on getting her friends back. Good. When they first uttered Templars, my mind flashed to a large organization of devout Christians during the medieval era. Historical accounts described them as fierce fighters and near fanatics for Christianity and God. Naruto winced at the quick, sharp pain at the utterance of his name, and his death did the same. Ultimately, they were brought down and dissolved, but few speculated that the organization went underground and remained in existence. Whether these speculations are true or not, the fact that there's a group of rogue exorcists out there kidnapping yokai presents a pretty big concern. Naruto took a deep breath. This next news would definitely hit Mocha hard. With his death ministrations, the leader I took down, known as Zacharias, admitted that the organization was planning something big. This something, I'm afraid, might involve your friends, Mocha. Mocha, who was silent this whole time, shot up on her feet. What do you mean? She was trembling in fear of her friends' fates. I can't assume what these Templars are planning, but it's possible that they're preparing to harness the power of the various yokai they've captured. Again, I don't know for sure, but I do know this. We'll stop whatever it is and we'll get your friends. I gave you my word that I would, and I'm not one to go back on promises. Naruto promised, with a confident, cheerful visage. Mocha took a deep breath before sitting back down and thanking him. Mere words shouldn't be able to calm her down at this stage, but the confidence and sunny aura coming off of him were infectious. Right now, our priority is finding out where the space is. To do that, we should spread out in different directions and we'll flare our supernatural power. With this Templar group out of commission, they'll eventually send another group to investigate. Each group should be able to sense the supernatural powers we'll be releasing. Once that happens, we'll take them out and gather more information. Naruto made a circular motion in the air with his finger, and it solidified into a silver-plated circle with the Gremory symbol imprinted in the middle. He handed one to Mocha before repeating the process and giving one to his death. With these, we'll be able to know where each of us at all times. If you notice a group of templars or anything that even resembles them, send a pulse of your magic through it, and we'll know you're in trouble. We'll teleport right away and assist in taking them. Got it? Both girls nodded. Once we find out where their base is, we'll take the clothing of the fallen templars and infiltrate the said base. From there on, we'll stick together and search for Mocha's friends. While splitting up would allow us to cover more ground, we need to maintain our cover of being in the same group. Besides, there might be stronger enemies in their lair. They unanimously agreed with his rationale. Well, I'll take first watch, so you girls G. Mocha cut into his announcement, I'll take first watch. Being a damper, I don't need too much sleep in the first place. Naruto nodded, then I'll take second watch and His Death will take third. His Death silently agreed but pulled Naruto over quickly for a chat. Naruto, I don't know about you but I have this weird feeling to get out of here. This whole place is just unsettling to say the least. She warned. Naruto furrowed his brow. I'm not sure if I feel the same, and even if you're right, we're moving away from this place anyways. His Death bit her lip before looking at him and stalking towards her respective tent. DXD. The night was unusually silent and thankfully, held no disturbances, allowing for a peaceful sleep. Once the sun began to rise, the three determined allies set off in different directions. Naruto was heading to the human civilization and thus, a more urban environment, while His Death and Mocha would remain in nature. Now separated, in an unspoken signal, they simultaneously released their power for a few seconds before deactivating it. Hopefully, if it went as planned, they would find Mocha's friends, stop whatever they were planning, and get the hell out of there. Of course, that was only if that would be the case if everything went their way. DXD. Near the two devils and dampers starting point, and deep underground lied a complex system of tunnels and the subterranean passages. Past the various templars stationed at the mouth of each underpass sat a man on his throne, thinking about the three faint auras he had felt. Next to him laid a blue broadsword with a golden edge and guard on the side of the handle. Deviating from the straight, double-edged blade, it was uniquely shaped and equally destructive. Even now, without its owner's touch, there was a dangerous hum from the almost sentient sword that craved destruction. The very space-time fabric seemed to give it a wide berth. It was perfect for the leader of Templars, a man that yearned for the extinction of all yokai. He sat there and exhaled a cloud of smoke that slowly drifted its way to the ceiling before dissipating in the air. It was a dangerous habit he picked up, but it was relaxing, almost therapeutic to feel the cancerous fumes go down his throat and then diffuse throughout his lungs. It was quite a paradoxical thought, to like something so detrimental to one's health. While he detested being in the same presence of any inhuman creature, experimenting on them was a whole another story. After all, his newest test subjects were so interesting. The blonde-haired half-devil possessed a unique sacred gear that worked hand in hand with his anger, and used his wrath to produce potent darkness. Though having only seen it in action for a small time produced mixed feelings. On one hand, he was quite sure that the short demonstration did not do the sacred gear justice. Like an onion having multiple layers, there were definitely more stages under the lackluster performance. On the other hand, he was 100% sure that the later stages would have prevented the capture of the group of four. At the very least, he would have suffered huge casualties before having to step in. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The silver-haired fallen possessed twilight healing. Nothing unique about that sacred gear, but certainly rare and useful. While skilled in light manipulation, there was nothing outstanding about the woman, besides her beauty. The other couple was just as interesting. The damper in his possession didn't have a sacred gear, but it didn't diminish her strength either. She was skilled in illusions and hand-to-hand combat. Though, her capture gave him the opportunity to learn more about the physiology of dampiers, where to hit. The black-haired fellow was the catch of the day, and more than made up for the damper's lack of sacred gear. Not only was he fast, but he also possessed an equally unique sacred gear that manipulated gravity. It was powerful, and it took both members from the hero faction to take him down. He wasn't too sure how it worked, but it would change soon. An attendant quickly made his way to the throne room and knelt at his feet, visibly eager to share his news with the leader of Templars. Speak of the devil. My lord, we have finished extracting the sacred gear and have prepared accordingly for you to absorb it. He smiled cruelly as he imagined trumpets blaring, the angels smiling, and the heavenly choir singing about his heroic deeds. He imagined his brother cheering him on to exterminate the pests and prevent them from killing anyways. It was also a pretty good excuse for revenge. All that was left in his plans was to get the stupid little damper in his possession. He scowled fiercely, As he recalled her escape, the feeling of losing yet another rare sacred gear re-emerged. It was no matter though. He had her friends in his possession, and if his intel was right, she would be walking right into his hands. He'd even give her a slight push in the right direction. Tell the research and medical branch to start dissecting the two specimens. I want to know all their weak points and abilities you can extract from their bodies. Don't bother keeping them alive. I can always get more. He stood and stepped down the gray, polished steps. Don't touch the other two subjects yet. I want to see the blonde's full capabilities from a safe distance. The female's sacred gear and healing could be useful given the right motivation. Right away, my lord. The attendant quickly stood up and made his way to the ritualistic room, with the leader right on his tail. Gideus. That was what they called him. Though that wasn't his original name, as his parents had named him Megan upon birth, hoping that he would protect them from poverty, intruders, and serve as a shield for his brother from any threats. But he had failed to protect his brother from them, and thus chose himself to rid himself of the name Megan. No longer was he a protector, though he protected humans from yokai. No, that was just an added benefit. The day they all died was the day he was born anew. Like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Gideon stepped over the corpses of his family and arose as Gideon. In Hebrew, it meant destroyer, and he would just that. How fitting for the wielder of Durandal. DXD. Near the general area of where Naruto was located, a certain blonde-haired, green-eyed man dressed in priest clothes walked around jauntily, clearly in a good mood. The reason? He had made his latest conquest. It certainly wasn't meant in a sexual manner. After all, such a loyal member of the Vatican would never sink to indulge in the pleasures of sex. After all, sexuality had a singular, fundamental purpose of procreation. So unless he was interested in having children, he was to remain a virgin. No, what Dulio Gesualdo meant was tasting new cuisine. As a self-proclaimed food critic, he considered his duty of tasting various foods of utmost importance. Thus, he justified his dereliction of duty of taking a short detour from his mission to taste India's curry for that reason. For a strong exorcist and a possessor of the second strongest Longinus, he was surprisingly carefree and light-hearted. Larking around India cost at least a 2-week delay, showing Dulio as a careless, duty-shirking kind of person. But besides his unhealthy addiction to discovering and tasting unique food, Dulio was skilled in what he did. As of now, he was tasked with retrieving Durandal. Recently, the church had discovered a natural holy sword wielder in Zenobia. The destructive holy sword would be a perfect asset for the young genius. Thankfully, the church and its higher-ups hadn't left him high and dry. They had given him a sheath and told him that the closer he got to Durandal, the hotter it would get. Right now, it was scalding hot and thrumming in anticipation to envelope its counterpart. Dulio was positive that the sword was in the vicinity of this area, and his suspicions were confirmed when he felt 3 magical presences, one closer to him than the other 2. If the devils were in possession of the sword, he would have to destroy them, he grimly acknowledged. The future's strongest exorcist would not fail. DXD. This environment was not in Naruto's liking. The air was a sharp decline in quality compared to the one he had been previously breathing in. He could feel the disgusting exhaust and fossil fuels making its way through his lungs, diffusing throughout his blood, and tainting its mark upon his body. He shuddered at the thought. It wasn't exactly stellar from a strategic standpoint. There were too many people bustling around with their phones in hand. His arsenal of magic would be limited, and to enter Godspeed, he would have to distance himself, lest he electrocutes the soft, untrained bodies of humans. He also had an inkling that the Templars, for all their talk of protecting humans, would not mind hitting them with stray blows, if it meant a better chance of killing him. While half-devil, Naruto was not a monster and wouldn't be able to idly stand by and let the passerby die if he could help it. Naruto stuck his hands in his pockets, occasionally flaring his power for the Templars to sense. Unfortunately, he attracted someone he thought was entirely unrelated to the situation. While passing by an alleyway, he heard a click and felt the cold barrel of what he assumed was a gun stick into his back. Naruto quickly stiffened and considered the possibilities of him escaping. He's skilled, he realized. Assuming he's not a regular thug looking for money, he managed to bypass my sensor abilities and sneak up on me. I can't risk teleporting away. Besides, it would take several seconds to cast and I'd be dead before then. He could risk discreetly casting an elemental spell, but that too would take a second or two. I'll have to resort to diplomatic techniques. Man, how did this get so troublesome? Look, a lazy voice sighed. I don't particularly like killing devils, and you're clearly not a stray, so just answer my questions and I'll be on my merry way. Naruto internally agreed. A Templar would have killed him immediately, so he was clearly an exorcist on a mission. Answering his questions was a fair trade for safety. The unknown figure pushed him into the alleyway and set up a barrier spell to prevent human interference, all while keeping his gun to Naruto's back. Do you know where the holy sword Durandal is? I'm afraid I don't. Why were you flaring your presence? Naruto hesitated. I was hoping to attract someone, or rather a group. What group are you referring to? The Knight Templars. The gun barrel shook for a second before stabilizing. I don't know if you know, kid, but that order dissolved ages ago. Not according to them. They introduced themselves like that, and they kidnapped my acquaintance's friends. Can you let me go now? His cheek was starting to hurt after being pressed into the moist brick wall. The gun barrel disappeared and Naruto turned to observe his would-be assassin's features. He had light, peachy skin with blonde hair and almost feminine features. A white stole was draped around his red, gold-embroidered chasuble, and the young man had black pants and shoes befitting of a priest. Here lied another chance to get outside help. We could use some help, you know. If these well-trained Templars are any indication, the leader and his personal guards are gonna be tough to take down. What do you say? Dulio wanted to help them, but he had delayed searching for Durandal long enough. Sorry, but I have a mission of my own. I see, can you at least tell me your name? He answered in a kind voice. Dulio Gejaldo. I'm sorry we didn't meet on better terms. Naruto laughed. Yeah, that kinda sucked, but I'm over it now. Name's Naruto Gremory. Gremory? As in the clan of the current Lucifer? Dulio mentally narrowed his eyes before brushing away his thoughts. The devil had been cooperating well enough and given enough information so there'd be no use in interrogating him further. In Naruto's pocket, a silver circle glowed and sent waves of energy, signaling him that one of his allies was in trouble. I'm sorry I have to depart in such a way. Naruto started teleporting away, but not before getting in his final words. But one of my friends might be in trouble. DXD? Before Naruto was contacted, boredom and impatience began to overtake Mocha's mind. Sure, the scenery around her was nice enough, with the birds singing their song and the leaves rustling from the slight breeze, but she had friends to save. She clenched her fists but sensing holy energy, dove into the nearest bushes as quietly as possible. Footsteps left slight underprints on the dirt path and occasionally snapped a stray twig. It stopped near Mocha's hiding place and her breaths began to get harder to conceal. With her adrenaline rushing, she tightened her muscles to get the drop on the Templar before the warrior began to walk away. Mocha briefly contemplated calling for help but decided against it. She wanted to spy on the Templar for any information and possibly follow the soldier right to where her friends were hiding. If Naruto and his death were called, they would have no idea of her intentions and would blow the opportunity. Besides, the aura she felt was singular and fairly weak. She could handle a simple foot soldier. She carefully raised her head and observed the actions before her. The Templar had his back to her and squatted on the floor, clearing away dirt and foliage. She then gripped onto something and lifted what appeared to be a secret entrance. This was exactly what she was hoping for. She was half tempted to knock the Templar out and jump right in but quickly calmed herself. The chances of retrieving her friends would be much greater with help. Although, she couldn't help but think that the whole situation was coincidental. But never mind that. She had to save her friends and this was one chance she wasn't going to blow. After the Templar disappeared down the dark hole, she waited a few minutes before alerting her friends. DXD? Naruto and his death emerged from thin air, hands raised and ready to deliver punishing blows. Unexpectedly, there were no Templars in the surrounding area. Upon seeing Mocha with her arms crossed and bouncing from foot to foot, they reluctantly lowered their guard but were still wary about the whole situation. Mocha? Naruto was expecting a number of Templars and Mocha embroiled in a fierce battle but instead, was greeted to a rather serene setting. Naruto have so manathing still. Whoa, slow down. He put his hands up, now utterly puzzled with the circumstances. Shrugging his shoulders, he beckoned the damper to continue talking but in a much calmer manner. Mocha was so excited and amped up with the recent information but for her friend's sake, reined herself in. Reckless haste would only get herself and her newfound allies killed. She took in a deep breath before informing him of what happened. Naruto was conflicted once Mocha had finished. What was presented to them were two crossroads. Two choices they could make. The first choice was to seize the opportunity and strike while the iron was hot. From what he had seen, the Templars were certainly trained, but with the three of them covering each other's backs and his death there to buy him time to enter Godspeed, the possible skirmishes would be easy to deal with. Without wasting any time, they would be able to quickly infiltrate the base and rescue Mocha's friends. With that over, he and his death would be able to regroup with more information and have more opportunities to cripple and eventually bring down the faction. However, there were too many unknowns, too many X factors that could be pivotal in them getting out intact. First, the Templars they encountered didn't seem to be that high-ranking. After all their leader revealed was that the faction was planning something big. Other than that, he didn't pick up anything noteworthy. There was a good chance that what they encountered were just foot soldiers, the lowest of the low in the Templar organization. If that was the case, the opponents that lied ahead would be too much for them to handle. Second, this all seemed a tad bit convenient. He had no idea whether Mocha could conceal her presence, and if this indeed was set up, they would be walking right into the lion's den. He made his decision. Mocha, I know this might be hard for you to hear. What are you even talking about? Don't you even finish that damn sentence. Mocha shouted at him, this is a golden opportunity right here. Look, if you want to back out of the alliance like the coward you are, that's fine. Break your word and go run away with your little girlfriend. Me? I'm gonna save my friends. She scoffed, toying with Naruto's conviction of never going back on his promises. He gritted his teeth. He knew exactly what she was doing and he absolutely hated it. But not because it was an insult to his pride. He hated it because it was true. How could he be the strongest devil to ever exist, when he couldn't even keep a promise? Even with every fiber of his body yelling and blaring at him to turn back, he steeled himself. From a distance, his death looked on with amusement as if the events unfolding before her was a soap opera. She was curious about how Naruto would respond. Whatever he would do, she would follow his footsteps. It was the least she could do as a fellow comrade and friend. Without a noise, he pulled out 3 blood-stained clothing and threw it at them. Immediately, the meaty musk hit their nostrils and both gagged in sheer disgust. If that wasn't enough, he rolled over 2 silver helmets with a cross adorning the front. The mouth-gagging, lip-curling sour smell from the top of the inside was... Nope. It was better to not think about it. Mocha hastily put on the clothes, even though the pants were half a size too big, and his death did the same. Unlike the deceased warriors, his death had a slim, lithe body and the priest-like outfit hung baggily around her waistline. With their disguises complete, Mocha threw open the entrance and stepped into the deep depths of murky shadows. Naruto held out his arm, stopping his death from taking another step. I have a bad feeling, so just be on guard. I don't want you getting hurt. Is my king getting worried over his queen? She jested with a familiar cool undertone, making sure to emphasize the words king and queen. Naruto scowled and hurriedly followed Mocha. Excuse me for worrying for a friend. A soft chuckle chased Naruto's ears, and in the dark entrance, no one noticed the slightly flushed face. She thought she was so funny, didn't she? His death smirked before gracefully descending. DxD. A certain distance away, Gideus grinned at the sight of the dark, purple orb implanted in his chest. Beneath its swirling violet color was a power that complemented his fighting style perfectly. The full capabilities of the sacred gear weren't explored yet, but from the short test run, it attracted all living things right in front of him. From there, it was child's play to draw Durandal and cut down the enemies. It was now time for test run number 2. 10 Knight Templars surrounded him in a circle formation with their swords drawn. In an unspoken signal, they charged. What a foolish tactic, to charge towards a destructive holy sword wielder in possession of a sacred gear that specialized in bringing the fight close and personal. He quickly outstretched his hand and the orb whirred in response. With sounds of surprise and shock, the Templars were forcibly pulled off their feet towards Gideon, who grinned in anticipation. A powerful strike with Durandal was all it took to thin the crowd to half its population. Bodies were bisected at the waist and hot, sticky intestines spilled out onto the floor. A sickening thud sounded when the top half of the Templars kissed the cold, hard ground. The remaining men gulped and looked at Gideon with trepidation. Legs trembled and failed to hold their weight as they lost the will to fight. With dread and fear clouding their mind, they bowed ashamedly, with their heads pressed down. Gideus looked on with amusement before another foot soldier walked in on the training session. He could barely meet his leader's eyes and with teeth clacking and chattering, narrowly said, "And my lord, I have done as why you asked? The damper should be entering our base soon." Gideus looked up and he gulped before mustering his courage. As you have asked, all 100 Templars have been recalled to the gathering room and have been relieved of watch duty. The smell of bodies was quickly getting to Gideus, so he briskly walked off to his throne room. As planned, the damper took the bait and would explore his base before finding her fellow friends, the blonde and the fawn. From there, he would allow the blonde to be freed and unlock his sacred gear. His Templars would then surround the Yukai, and there, Gideus would watch the unknown power in action roam the shadows. Once satisfied, he would send his weapon and the 2 hero faction warriors to clean up the exhausted monsters. Of course, the blonde would be spared for the sacred gear extraction. Gideon stopped in his tracks. What was the name of his current sacred gear anyways? Right, the childish head of the research branch had called it Ominous Nebula. How he wished to test it in a real battle. The tension was thick in the air as the group of 3 marched through the dark corridor. When Naruto stepped down the stairs, he was expecting to see guards stationed nearby. Instead, the passage was eerily empty, filled with the soft sounds of their footsteps. This fact was observed by Naruto, and the fear of this being a trap only gnawed away at the pit of his gut. As far as he could see, the passageway only branched straight ahead. There were few sources of light, and the coal-colored walls closing on their sides did nothing to ease their nerves. The very floor they were walking on seemed to leach the tinge of life off their faces. After walking for what it seemed to be hours, they finally saw 3 paths forking off in different directions. To Mocha's and the devil's interest, yells of outrage and grief drifted from the path on their left. Peeking around the corner, they caught view of a thick, iron door barring anyone without proper clearance from entering. Naruto glanced at the other 2 paths, to only see nothing in the far distance. Being a devil, Naruto and his death both possessed night vision and enhanced eyesight. That being said, they still couldn't see what the 2 paths led to. The path to the left at least showed a door, and while Naruto would avoid sounds of distress noises like that usually signaled the presence of enemy deep down, Naruto was a sucker for doing something called the right thing. For all he knew, there could be those accursed templars and they're torturing something in that room. Besides, there was a pretty high probability that Mocha's friends were in there. Speaking of Mocha, she seemed like she was all in for charging through the door, and once Naruto gave a slight incline of his neck, she rushed towards the entrance and kicked it with all her might. While the door was indeed mighty, as it was made out of tempered steel, the Templars had mistakenly left the old, flawed hinges intact. With a mighty crack, the door flew from the impact of the damper's foot, and Naruto saw what appeared to be a prison. The Templars did not put much effort into keeping the cells clean enough to reside in. If anything, they went out of their way to make the living conditions as inhumane as possible. The bars of each cell were crusted with some kind of black fungi. Naruto had no idea what it was, nor did he want to know. The ground seemed to be soaked with urine, and the stench of feces made Naruto gag. As they passed the cell of each Ichikai, they looked at him with pleading eyes and begged for freedom. Others were not so subtle, and with the Templars gone, yelled and shouted at the 3 to let them loose. Mocha gasped and hurried to one of the cells with hope and relief shining bright as the sun in her eyes. Finally, after years of protecting and sheltering her, she was able to protect and save them for once. Meliodas! Elizabeth! Naruto immediately spotted the people Mocha was shouting at. From the sea of imprisoned, suffering Yukai, these 2 stood out to him, even with mud and their blood staining and nearly making their faces unrecognizable. With a back to the wall, a boy with messy blonde hair was sitting on the unhygienic ground. His emerald green eyes glimmered with recognition as he caught sight of the silver-haired damper. His normally crisp, white button front shirt was stained red and brown. A shredded black vest hung limply around his shoulders and a red tie was wrapped around his arm, preventing some sort of wound from bleeding out. On his lap was a silver-haired, slender woman, and her dark black wings were out on full display. Despite initially being asleep, upon hearing Mocha's shout, her eyelids slowly rose, revealing kind blue eyes. Thankfully, her clothes, while dirty, covered her lady parts and helped her keep her modesty. The now identified Meliodas pushed himself up and grinned proudly at Mocha. "I knew you'd come for us. You even brought friends." His green eyes moved to Naruto and his death. Without any hesitation, Mocha ripped the iron bars with her bare hands like it was wet paper, effectively setting the couple free. She rushed to them and immediately knelt to look over Meliodas' wounds. "Are you okay? Do you have any wounds? I was so scared they killed you." Mocha sobbed and hugged the short blonde. Meliodas' eyes hardened. "Yeah, we weren't touched, but some guy took away Zeldris and Gelda while saying something about experiments. We need to hurry, they might have done something to them." Unconsciously, he tried flaring his demonic power, but it was effectively suppressed by his cuffs, something Naruto noted. "Those restraints are keeping your powers in check?" Naruto narrowed his eyes and walked next to Mocha. "There should be some kind of key to unlock them, but there are no soldiers around. Let me try something." The redhead raised his hands and a set of blue runes appeared on the cuffs before flickering away. "TCH. Naruto shook his head in frustration. "The cuffs are resistant to magic as well. The only way you're getting out of those cuffs is with a key." Meliodas softly smiled. "That's alright. I wasn't expecting things to be so easy. The people who took us prisoner had everything planned. They took us by surprise with an ambush and attacked us when we were vulnerable. They're professionals." He hugged the fallen closer to his chest and asked, "Can you give us your name?" Naruto's eyes twinkled with mirth. Even with the prisoners suffering all around them, he couldn't help but smile back. The blonde's happiness was infectious. "Naruto Gremory, at your service." He extended his hand for a handshake and Meliodas took it. "Meliodas. No last name. I grew up as an orphan. The one laying on my lap is Elizabeth. I hope you don't have any problems with her being a fallen angel." He looked at Naruto and silently threatened him to speak out against him. The crimson-haired devil couldn't help but relate to the experience of growing up alone. Luckily, he had adapted quickly to the harsh lifestyle and picked up quite a few skills involving theft and pickpocketing. As for the fallen, Naruto shrugged. "If you trust her, I'm fine with it." Meliodas visibly relaxed, and before they knew it, both started small talk in an attempt to know each other better. While the 2 males were talking about who knows what, his death was diligently scouring the prison for any signs of a key. Freeing the couple would mean extra allies and they could use the manpower. Ignoring the cries of the yokai, she spotted an area in the very back. From what she saw, It was a simple place for the Templars to overview the prisoners and make sure nothing was going wrong. A wooden desk stood right next to the wall, and implanted in the same wall was an alarm. Underneath the desk were several boxes, and she quickly punched on them. Ripping open the first one, all she saw was a multitude of musty books detailing the works of Christ and Christianity in general. She threw it aside and continued her search for a key. After discovering more journals and papers, she reached the last box. Upon opening it, she finally saw what she was looking for, several silver keys hanging from a keychain. She reached for it, and winced when her palm hissed from the painful contact. Was it doused in holy water? Or maybe the metal itself was the cause? Pushing away these thoughts, she grabbed the keychain, rushed to Naruto, and dropped the keys before his feet. Naruto, now interrupted from his briefing of the situation, turned to her. Death explained, I found keys in the back and I'm assuming one of them can free Meliodas and Elizabeth. Naruto punched his fist into the palm of his other hand and exhaled excitedly. Looks like we can get you guys. Wait, Death, are you hurt? He had noticed Death cradling her right hand and briefly saw red irritated skin. She said nothing. He reached out to her arm, gently pushed her fingers back, and tightened his jaw. You should have told me about this. Using his other hand, he conjured a simple healing spell and continued berating her. It's not that hard for me to heal wounds on this level, and hiding them only makes it worse. You're one of my precious comrades, so don't ever be afraid to ask for help. Throughout the short lecture, Death didn't move from her position at all and stood stiffly, just like a statue. Instead, her mind focused on his last sentence and particularly on one word, precious. The corners of her mouth quirked up at the sound of being called precious. Did you even hear anything I said? Naruto sighed and looked at the keys. Besides all that, good job on finding the keys. Ignoring the stinging pain, he tried each key into the lock and before he knew it, one of them fit perfectly. After turning the hay and freeing Meliodas, he cast a quick healing spell and turned to Elizabeth to do the same. Alright. Let's get the hell out of here. Meliodas stood up and held Elizabeth in bridal style. Death turned to Naruto to ask what they should do and he nodded. Now that we have Mocha's friends, it'll be better to regroup. But before we leave, we'll set the yokai free. Mocha? The damper happily obliged and tore through the cell bars. Many grunts of relief were heard and further cheers of happiness sounded throughout the hallway. The first chance they got, they ran through the fallen iron door and began their search for freedom. To their surprise, these sounds were quickly silenced and replaced with the noise of metal sinking into flesh. With a grimace on his face, Naruto took off with Death and the rest right on his heels. As soon as they reached the entranceway, they were introduced to numerous Templars ruthlessly cutting down the yokai, ignoring the screams for mercy. Without any sign, Naruto entered the fray and pushed the yokai behind him. With a wave of his hand, several magic circles materialized in front of him, and a roaring flame erupted, roasting the Templars into no more than black crisps. Not a second later, Death appeared by his side and conjured sparkling, blue icicles to impale the remaining Templars. With a sickening shink, the blue net efficiently targeted the vital points, killing her targets easily. DXD. With Gideon. The now armored man was clenching his fists as he observed the fight through his crystal orb. This wasn't supposed to be happening. The intruders were much stronger than he expected and unfortunately, the magic resilient, or he used to make the suppressing cuffs was rare, and thus, he had a limited amount. The armor his Templars had on was ineffective against the redhead's magic. If he wanted to see the blonde's sacred gear in action, he would have to distract the others. So far, the blonde was focused on the fallen and only helped when it was absolutely necessary. Sure, he showed his strength, speed, and reflexes, but he had yet to show the capabilities of his sacred gear, and it made him so mad. You! Gideon pointed to his attendant. Call Eric and Urza. Tell them they are to get the attention of the red-haired devil, Blueannette, and the damper. They are to leave the blonde and the fallen alone. Do you understand? The attendant nodded and rushed to find the two warriors. Gideon rubbed his hands together and leaned closer to his orb, his eyes giving Meliodas his undivided attention. Show me your strength, devil. What kind of tricks are you hiding up your sleeve? DXD. Naruto and Death were a fearsome pair, as their month-long training honed their individual skills and their teamwork. While Naruto bombarded the Templars with a widespread attack, Death would rush in to sweep up any survivors. Behind the duo, Mocha helped Meliodas carry Elizabeth as the trio hoped to get out of the base and go back to their simple lifestyle. As they neared their original point, to the right corner awaited a girl, displeased with the whole situation but determined to do her job. Naruto stiffened and Death stopped in her tracks. He put his finger to his lips to signal silence and crept to the corner. At the same time, the girl beckoned to her partner and the Templars behind her and lunged at the enemy. With supreme reflexes that could only have been earned from harsh training, Naruto dodged a lethal strike of a sword to his face and raised his arms in response. Two large, black circles formed on the bottom of his palms and slowly extended outwards. The redhead had converted his runes into weapons that served as chakrams. The girl pushed Naruto to the hallway on their right and began swinging precise, powerful strikes. Using his magic circles, Naruto used her momentum to deflect each attempt on his life and waited for her to lower her guard. While the girl engaged Naruto, his death was dragged into a fight with a slender, young male. Without a word, he kicked his death in the gut, sending her tumbling to the hallway straight ahead. To Mocha and Meliodas, it appeared that their companions were ambushed by two skilled opponents. Naruto was now busy fighting an armored girl in the hall straight ahead, and his death had been kicked into the hallway to their left. Unfortunately, they didn't have too much time to dwell on the situation, as a large group of Templars blocked their way. Meliodas gritted his teeth. He had to use it. Mocha wasn't strong enough to take on all of these opponents. Mocha, take care of Elizabeth. He carefully handed the silver-haired fallen to Mocha and the damper, with equal amounts of care, held her close to her chest. He closed his eyes and drowned out all noises in the background. Think back to your hate. The Templars looked at each other, confused as to why Meliodas wasn't attacking them. When were you truly angry? They waited for a few more seconds to see if he was going to make the first move. When was the last time you wanted to feel the snapping of bones, splitting of flesh, and the warm sensation of blood? What are we waiting for? Think. One impatient Templar unsheathed his sword and charged. And unleash your wrath. Meliodas opened his now dark violet eyes swirling with hate just in time to see a holy sword slashing downwards. Ignoring Mocha's pleas to pay attention, he caught the blade with just 2 fingers and snapped it into a million pieces. After witnessing this feat, the Templar tried backing away in fear, but Meliodas grasped his head with one hand. This is my sacred gear, Berserker's Rage, Stage 1. He squeezed tightly and the Templar's skull burst into blood, bone, and brain matter. The body fell limply onto the floor, and Meliodas glared at the rest of them. Unconsciously, they all took a step back. The same thing will happen to all of you. Your fate was decided when you tried hurting my friends. Each Templar held on to their sword even tighter and tried grasping to their confidence. To their dismay, every cell of their body refused to move as the monster in front of them charged with an explosive first step. There was nothing they could do to stop this massacre. DxD. With Naruto. He was in trouble. Naruto barely had any time to activate Godspeed, as the red-headed girl in front of him refused to back down. She furiously swiped at his head and Naruto was forced to back off further and further until he could barely see his friends. Now, seeing that his friends were a good distance away, Naruto activated his elemental attacks. Lightning Beast Chase. 4 wolves made of pure lightning rushed towards the girl, who strangely enough, did nothing and merely stood there. It didn't completely matter to Naruto, as he had delayed the spell so the wolves wouldn't hit her all at once. All he needed was 10 seconds and 10 seconds he got. Godspeed! He dropped the black magic circles beneath his palms as he underwent his ethereal transformation. His hair strands lit up the dark hallway with the occasional blue flickers. Naruto smiled and punched his fist into his other palm. Get ready for a beatdown. Even though the hall wasn't the largest nor widest battlefield he could ask for, he ran at her in a zigzag formation in an attempt to confuse her before going for a thunderous punch to her face. At least, that was the plan. As soon as Naruto left the ground to punch the girl, she demonstrated her flexibility by stretching backwards and completely evading his strike. Still in the air, Naruto was vulnerable to an attack and she tried to capitalize on that. A vicious sword strike nearly bisected Naruto at the waist, but he slammed his 2 hands on the flat part of the blade, trapping the weapon. Naruto came down hard on the ground and he lessened the impact by rolling several times. While he was now closer to his friends, he was still confused. His opponent had enough speed to dodge his attack? Who are you? The redhead pointed her sword to Naruto and bent her knees, ready to take off to face her opponent. I am Urza Scarlet, second in command of the Templars. I am merely a weapon, a tool for my master to use. Naruto's sweat dropped. What kind of mentality is that? Without answering, Urza charged at Naruto and thrust her sword in an attempt to pierce him straight through his chest. Still in Godspeed, Naruto dodged each strike and quickly searched for any openings. There. He ducked under a particularly ferocious strike and thrust his hand out. A fiery magic circle appeared and a flaming bullet hit her right in her armored chest. The small-scale explosion pushed her back and a black cloud partially filled the hallway. I had to minimize the amount of magic I put into that. If I made it any bigger, I'd be caught in the explosion as well. However, that attack isn't exactly a pushover and at the very least should have damaged her armor. What? After Urza stepped through the clouds of ash, she revealed her unblemished armor. There were few gray smudges of soot on her cheeks but otherwise she was unharmed. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Is her armor that strong? Was it specifically made to protect her against fire attacks? Wait. My lightning attack from earlier did nothing either. Her armor has to be resilient against magical attacks in general. Is it some kind of enchantment that allows her to tank all this damage? Your armor is resistant to magic, he guessed. Urza tilted her head before nodding. Indeed it is. The several enchantments make it nigh impossible to destroy using magical attacks. Normally, I'd be worried about physical attacks, but your punches aren't the strongest. She took a step closer to him. Fast? Yes, but not strong enough to hurt me severely. While Urza was talking about her armor, Naruto desperately analyzed her body for some type of weakness. Right now, her head is my best shot. It isn't covered with any armor, so she must have brought her armored hands up to block my lightning attack. With his plan in mind, he rushed at Urza hoping to land a punch on her face. Unfortunately for him, after dismissing the openings to her torso, she realized what he had in mind and defended accordingly. Her gleaming, sharp sword kept him from a distance, and with each passing second, he grew more and more frustrated. I can't seem to land a hit on her face. Let's go for some feints. He faked a right hook and pretended to sweep her legs underneath her before jumping back and unleashing more elemental attacks. Rush rock, and roaring flames. Naruto unleashed a sea of flames that rushed towards Urza before shooting jagged pieces of rocks, all aimed at her face. In response, she merely tanked the fire attack and used her sword to cleanly slice the rocks before they hit her. Naruto wasn't finished. As soon as the flames started to die down, with a burst of speed, Naruto sped behind her and attempted to punch her. Unluckily, Urza had noticed the slight breeze that was let off when Naruto ran towards her and took note of Naruto's position. She moved her head to the side and his fist barely clipped her ear. He still wasn't finished. While Urza had dodged his punch, she couldn't dodge the bolt of lightning to the side of her face. While it was significantly weaker than the real deal, the voltage momentarily shocked her with its burning, stinging pain, and Naruto took that opening to conjure another fire attack. With her life on the line, Urza threw her body forwards and barely managed to dodge the searing flames. TSK. It was Urza's turn to narrow her eyes. She didn't sense any magic circles being summoned when he unleashed that lightning attack, so where did it come from? Could it be his Godspeed? At that moment, Urza had let her guard down and was struck with tremendous force from behind. She was sent tumbling past Naruto and landed in a messy heap. Not bad. Naruto looked up and saw Meliodas wearing some kind of necklace that was pulsating heavy amounts of killing intent. No longer a shining emerald color, his eyes were blazing with a dark purple color that threatened any enemy to fight him. Meliodas! At the sound of his name, Meliodas turned his gaze to Naruto, and his gaze softened for just a second. You alright? I'm fine. Physically, he wasn't too roughed up. His pride, on the other hand? Shattered. He had thought his Godspeed would give him the edge over her, but she had obtained the same speed through natural means, or at least the ability to fight him off in that mode. Meliodas, on the other hand, made it look so easy. With a single punch, he sent Urza flying. It pissed him off. And his death? Meliodas turned around. Time to back her up. DXD? Somewhere in the base. Gideon smiled. What he just witnessed was vastly impressive. This so-called Meliodas had taken his templars with ease, and the ill intent his sacred gear was quite frankly terrifying. He was able to observe several changes in Meliodas's body, but his templars were just too weak. They wouldn't be able to push him to show all his cards. Sometimes you just had to get your hands dirty. Gideon grabbed Durandal and made his way to intercept his test subjects. DXD? Above ground. Dulio was panicking. He had felt the killing internet from a mile away. What was it? Were there devils around killing humans? Was it a stray? Maybe the boy he met earlier? He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Sure, he had a top-secret mission to find Durandal, but that didn't mean he could let innocents get killed, not when he could actually do something. No amount of human lives were worth finding Durandal faster. That was one of the first things the church had taught him. God had created men and women in his image, and thus, every human life was precious. Life wasn't just something you could play around with, it was something to be cherished and cared for. Durandal could wait. He needed to find the source of this killing intent. DXD? With his death. A slender, young man had managed to get the drop on his death, but luckily, she had managed to protect her vital points and avoided major damage. My name is Nathan of the Hero faction. I shall be your opponent. He drew a short holy sword and charged at his death. While not a master in wielding swords, his death wasn't a complete novice and knew a couple of tricks. Her opponent came at her ferociously and they met in the middle, his death with a sword made from ice and Nathan with his holy sword. Still locked in the middle, his death chose to back down slightly and sent a wave of icicles at him as a distraction. While he was busy cutting each ice shard into pieces, she focused all her power into the ground in front of her for a frontal attack. Arctic Wonderland. With her prodigal control over ice, the Bluenet had managed to cover every surface in front of her into ice. The ground was now slippery and extremely treacherous to tread on. The walls weren't spared either and were frozen over as well. Nathan slowly looked around him and prepared to fight once more. He widened his eyes when he saw more icicles incoming. Even slipping and having terrible footing, he showed his exceptional swordsmanship by cutting them down. TCH. His death narrowed her eyes and her sadistic side started to influence her mind. Let's see how long you can last. Pillars erupted from the side of Nathan, and he had to drop his sword to grasp both pillars, stopping them from crushing him. However, he was now seemingly unable to move and defend himself. His death tilted her head. Try getting out of this one. Even more icicles flew towards Nathan, but to his death's dismay, he was not cut down. Instead, his sword he had dropped was now levitating and cut into each icicle. Telekinesis? Is this his sacred gear? Before she had time to test her theory out, Meliodas and Naruto had come to back her up. Thrusting his finger, Naruto unleashed a bolt of lightning and Meliodas swiped his hand through the air, summoning a mysterious, yet ominous purple flame that slowly consumed the ice. Are you okay? Naruto asked and got ready to heal her, in case she was injured anywhere. She huffed. Thanks, but I had things under control here. Well, what are we waiting for? Both Naruto and his death looked to Meliodas. Let's get the hell out of here. I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you right there. A brown-haired man with an athletic build walked towards their direction and stopped a distance away. His silver armor covered his chest and legs but did nothing to shield his arms. In one hand he held a blue, gold-coated holy sword and the other grasped a Spartan-style helmet. He stabbed the sword into the ground and it promptly created a crater 3 feet wide. The man was seemingly unfazed by the destructiveness of his sword. Oops. I'm sorry for that. My sword is unusually excited today. He placed his helmet over his head and stared at them. My name is Gideon and right now you're my test subjects. Meliodas snarled as soon as his boiling, purple eyes caught sight of the man in front of them. You're the ones that took Zeldris and Gelda. What the hell did you do to them? Meliodas was now emanating an aura of death that slightly ruptured and cracked the ground he was standing above. Gideon ignored him and merely gave his holy sword a couple of practice swings. Zeldris and Gelda? I'm assuming you're referring to the black-haired half-devil and the damper? Meliodas nodded as he and Mocha both listened tentatively. Man, oh man! I haven't had a good fight in a while, so I'm hoping you'll give one to me. The Templar leader promptly deflected the question and instead focused on Naruto. Your hair. What of it? Naruto snapped irritably, slightly vexed by the gap of skill and power between him and Meliodas. Gideon hummed. It reminded me of two things. When I first saw your crimson color, I thought of the Gremory clan. Who wouldn't? Such a filthy group of devils yet blessed with such destructive powers. He stopped swinging his sword and held the blade by his side. Then I remembered the other clan, the Uzumaki clan. Their legendary power was indeed commendable, but their calling card was their bright red hair. It's a travesty that such a prominent devil clan bears much resemblance to the legendary group of humans. On the outside, Naruto appeared calm and only gave the slightest twitch at the mention of his unused surname. On the inside, however, existed a burning turmoil, one that blazed with curiosity, pride, and anger. While it was true Naruto wasn't too fond of Venelana or Rias, after living for a number of years in the Gremory household, it was natural that he developed some sense of pride in the Gremory name. To have a man praise the Uzumakis to such high lengths but degrade the Gremorys with harsh, biting words led to Naruto having a mixed sense of pride and hate. Yet nothing was greater than his newfound curiosity. For years, he was not told of the significance of the Uzumakis, and suddenly, here was a man that had such knowledge. Venelana was in charge of my education and there was nothing about the Uzumakis in our library, so I assumed Venelana is the reason for that. But I've asked Sairaorg about my surname, and he was equally ignorant as I was. This is my best chance for information. The Uzumakis? Where do they reside? And what power are you referring to? Naruto asked, hoping that his enemy would shed some light on the matter. Gideon laughed. Hoping to wipe them out before they make a move against you. How fitting for a lowly devil like you. Naruto clenched his fists and tried his best to ignore the derogatory comments. Don't you worry. As much as it pains me to say it, the Uzumakis were wiped out years ago. No one knows how or why, but they don't exist. Where they lived? Gideon scoffed. It won't matter. They had powerful barrier spells that even gods couldn't penetrate. Its power still hasn't diminished to this day, and only one with Uzumaki blood could even hope to enter. At this point, Gideon's eyes glazed over as he reminisced over his memories. I've been to their home before, or at least their entrance. To the east of Japan lies a string of 3 uninhabited islands, one of which contains the gateway to Uzumaki, the village hidden by whirling tides, and boy, is it guarded well. He laughed joyfully as if the tension and killing intent wasn't in the air. It was quite disturbing, in Naruto's mind. After searching for a couple of weeks I found that there was a stone statue near the bottom too. One island is pretty normal, it's got animals, trees, and a stable ecosystem. The other? He shook his head. It's completely barren. You'd better off calling it a really big piece of rock because there are no trees, animals. Nothing. Gideon leaned closer as if he was telling a secret, which he essentially was. But that's a lie. There are way too many protective spells around it to be seemingly worthless, so I've theorized that it's the home of the Uzumakis. You can't fly to that damn island, nor can you teleport. Digging an underground tunnel gets you nowhere since there are spells placed underneath as well. The waters all around the island seem calm enough, but if you fall in, it's game over. You'll be whisked to the depths of the ocean, where you'll eventually be ripped to shreds. I've seen it for myself. He scratched the side of his cheek and leaned back, now comfortably leaning on his sword. I'm guessing that the stone statue requires Uzumaki blood to deactivate the barriers and get across. Unfortunately, we're fresh out of Uzumaki, so whatever secret powers they're hiding on that island are gone forever. And their powers? Naruto added. Gideon scoffed. Ha! Of course, you devils wouldn't acknowledge their might. The most common power is their sacred gear, chain jail. There were 3 or 4 Uzumakis that inherited that sacred gear, and they had some sort of ritual that allowed them to pass it down to their successors. I've only seen it in action twice, but I can testify for its power and versatility. They're extremely well versed in barriers and protective spells, but that's not all there's to it. Gideon's eyes now shone with excitement and a slight hint of madness. There's so many rumors of their power. Their founder possessed the ability to manipulate wood. There are even more rumors and old stories that hint at them being able to use senjutsu. Isn't that marvelous? He threw his head back and laughed heartily. To retain their humanity, but to also be able to use a power thought to be restricted to those filthy yokai. I worship them. After all, they were the very paragon of what the human race should strive to be. Finishing his lecture, he looked curiously at Naruto. Though your fascination with them amazes me. Tell me, devil, why do you ask? I'm sure the older generation of the devils should have heard of their legendary might. Am I wrong? It doesn't matter. Meliodas interrupted him and unknowingly saved Naruto from answering the question. I'll only ask you one more time. What did you do to Zeldris and Gelda? Naruto had long forgotten about Meliodas flaring his power, as he was enraptured in Gideon's tale of the Uzumakis. Now that their conversation was over, the blonde had resumed raising his power and anger. Gideon, for the most part, was unimpressed. If you wanted to see them, all you had to do was ask. He motioned to his attendants, and they disappeared into the dark hallway with quiet clicks of their feet. The awkward silence between the two foes was overbearing, but thankfully, after a few minutes, the attendees then reappeared with 2 things. Naruto prided himself on keeping a calm, rational mind while keeping his emotions at bay. A slight disturbance in his mental mind was all a skilled enemy needed to deal a killing blow. Yet with all this in his mind, even with his small share of battles and witnessing the aftermath of Estetha's massacre, he was not prepared for the sight before him. He could barely distinguish the gender between the 2 bloodied meatbags, for a lack of better terms. Their faces were sliced into, and their mouths gaped in mid-scream. For some sick, twisted reason, their eyes were removed, leaving 2 bloodied sockets. Along with their eyes, their limbs had been cleanly sliced from the stump. Their entire body was covered and dried with the scarlet liquid. For the first time, Naruto realized what kind of monster they were up against. Even though he had drilled inside his brain to never take his eyes away from the enemy and never let your guard down, he allowed this one moment of weakness to take over. Closing his eyes, he then took in a deep breath and tried to ignore the stench of blood. He failed. Breathe in. Breathe out. Repeat. He opened his eyes with a fierce resolve to protect his companions. If looks could kill, Gideon would be dead 10 times over. Purple flames glittered, showing its harsh beauty as it wrapped around Meliodas' arms. Not a single word was said as his top was cleanly burned off, exposing his chest and impressive abdominal muscles. Dark red flickers of his demonic energy crackled around him, as he tried his hardest to keep his powers under control. Under his breath, he repeated control over and over. To this, Gideon looked more excited than scared. He bent his knees and readied his blade in one hand. This is more like it. Show me your power, Meliodas. Behind the Mocha looked emotionally stable at an unsuspecting glance, but at closer inspection, Naruto could see the dull, emotionless eyes, the occasional tremor sending shockwaves throughout her body, and the denial. Her legs couldn't handle the emotional shock and she fell to her knees. The damper's arms hung limply around Elizabeth to offer little protection, but it was clear the girl was out of it. You did this for what? Meliodas whispered. For me to show you my power? He chuckled humorlessly and his energy spiked to new levels. I'm going to kill you! With an earth-shattering roar, the devil disappeared in a burst of speed and punched Gideon. The air burst all around the two as his fist met Durandal. Even as the blonde's fist sizzled from the contact with the destructive sword, he persisted and with all his strength, pushed Gideon with all his might. The Templar stood no chance. He was sent tumbling back into the prison area and stabbed Durandal into the ground, stopping himself in his tracks. Meliodas took his time walking towards Gideon when the two warriors, Urza and Nathan, erupted from the hallways from the sides and attempted to strike him down, Urza in her magic-resistant armor and Nathan controlling two more swords in the air and another two in his hands. They didn't get close. Meliodas skillfully ducked and weaved his way through their slashes and counterattacked. Without even a glance in their direction, two purple, tentacle-like spikes materialized from his back and slammed into them, sending them back from where they came from. Before they could recover and halt Meliodas in his tracks, Naruto and Esteth acted. Running to their respective opponents, they clashed against the two warriors. Leave them to us! Naruto shouted before blowing Urza back with a powerful gust of wind. Meliodas seemingly ignored him and stalked towards his prey, each step cracking the ground with its pressure. He threw his arms back and formed an axe head on his left hand and a shield in his right. He's forming weapons from his demonic energy. Is this another one of his tricks from his sacred gear? How delightful! Gideon stood back up and pointed Durandal towards the blonde. Show me more of your tricks, devil. I'm going to squeeze every bit of information out of your sacred gear and learn all your secrets before killing you. Meliodas kept stepping towards him, his sacred gear power manifesting his devil powers into pure, tangible darkness. Kill me? He laughed that cold, humorless laugh once more. You don't realize it, do you? You're already dead, you just haven't realized it yet. That cold yet the blunt way of talking scared Gideon, even if he wouldn't admit it. Berserker's Rage, Stage 2. A jagged, black scar-like mark ran down through his left eye and stopped just below it. Gideon laughed. We'll see about that. He hefted Durandal on his shoulder and lunged. Their battle had begun. DxD. With his death. She didn't have too much time. The magical pressure Meliodas was releasing was straining the entire underground complex, and by using such destructive techniques, they'd be exposed to the upper ground any time soon. While they were far from human civilization, other entities would be alerted to their presence due to Meliodas' seemingly unquenchable bloodlust and Durandal's destructive aura. Esteth assumed that there were heavy magic suppressors underground, as the trio of Naruto, her, and Mocha were completely unaware of Durandal's holy aura. With a quick burst of her magic, she formed an ice dome that briefly held off Nathan, creating a window for her to come up with a plan. The problem was the lack of intel. She had no idea how Nathan's powers worked. She caught a brief glimpse of him controlling two swords without any limbs. Was it telekinesis? If it was, why wasn't he controlling anything else? There was plenty of rubble he could use as a distraction. Perhaps he could only control weapons? All of these thoughts flashed through her mind within a couple of seconds, as Nathan quickly cut her shield in pieces with his 4 swords. The 2 floating swords threw themselves at her, and she barely dodged to her right, the blades now embedded in the ground behind her. He quickly engaged her in a flurry of strikes, most of which missed her body. Clicking his teeth in frustration, the swords behind her flew into action and tried impaling her again. With impressive reflexes, she ducked to avoid the mentally controlled blades while also evading his manual strikes. Breathing heavily, she threw herself backward and bombarded him with hardened ice spheres. Unfortunately, with incredible skill, Nathan manipulated his 2 floating swords and spun them at high velocities, slicing the spheres into glimmering shards. TCH. He was much more skilled with his sacred gear than she thought. Though, this was assuming his sacred gear was what allowed him to control his weapons through mind control in the first place. What to do? Esteth mused. She could use her, Arctic Wonderland, to cut off his movements, but he'd still be able to control those 2 swords of his. Not to mention the fact that he wouldn't be completely motionless. The ice would just make movement difficult, not impossible. Of course, for her, the ice would never be a hindrance. Still, it was a good start. Freezing breath. As the temperature rapidly dropped in the hallway they were fighting in, Esteth raised her palms in his direction and a visible, freezing cloud shot out from her fingers and raced towards Nathan. Not wanting to make any skin contact with the cloud out of fear of frostbite and missing fingers, the young hero faction member gritted his teeth and dropped the swords in his hands. Instead, he devoted all his attention to spinning the blades in front of him to repel the cloud backward. The pure speed of the swords generated a strong enough wind that pushed the cloud back. He dropped his swords. Maybe the strain from mentally commanding his swords to move at such speeds is what forced him to drop his swords. The icy mist covered Esteth's figure, and when she stepped out she said 2 words that chilled Nathan to the core. Arctic Wonderland. Nathan didn't think the temperature could get any lower. He was dead wrong. Once more, the temperature dropped to freezing conditions as all surfaces around them were frozen instantly. Grudgingly picking up his swords, he braced himself for any attacks. Shink! He narrowed his eyes as he watched Death draw a shining rapier from inside her clothing. She charged right at him, her legs seemingly disregarding the slippery floor. Right before she reached him, twin spears of medium thickness erupted from the sides of the wall, and if not for his training, would have impaled him through the sides. Due to unfavorable circumstances, Nathan nearly slipped when moving back to avoid the spears, which now jutted towards the walls in an X formation. Meanwhile, Death slid under the two spears and swung her rapier to her left, aiming at his legs, which was promptly blocked by one of his levitating swords. Not letting that faze her, she athletically jumped while slashing upwards. Again, her attempt in grievously harming him was thwarted. Still, her training with Naruto had taught her to keep moving and adapting to her situation. To Nathan's surprise, she dropped her rapier, leaving one of his swords nothing to hold off. With a great deal of concentration, she formed an ice blade from nothing and swung, hoping to bisect him, an action that distracted another one of his levitating swords. While that was happening, ice spikes quickly branched from the twin ice spears and moved to impale him in the chest and head, forcing him to block both spikes with his two swords. Death moved to trap her opponent and shot another, freezing breath, at his legs. Checkmate. While Nathan was trained well by his mentors, he was not capable of fighting off so many attacks at once. With him holding off various attacks, he did not have the sheer mental capacity to spin his sword in an attempt to blow away the freezing cloud. As a result, his lower limbs were promptly frozen. Nathan screamed in agony, and while his concentration wavered, she snatched up her rapier and shoved it right through his chest. Blood dribbled from his mouth, but despite the unfavorable situation he was in, he smiled. Death widened her eyes and watched as her rapier quickly pulled itself out and stabbed her in the chest. At least, that was what Nathan thought was going to happen. With a loud clink, the rapier snapped in half as it attempted to pierce Death's heart. Instead of the soft flesh the blade was supposed to find, in its place was hardened ice. Not bad, Death commented. You had me by surprise there. I'm assuming sacred gear allows you to control weapons that make contact with your blood? He nodded weakly. Too bad for you. I make it a tradition to cover my entire body in protective ice before fighting. While thin and colorless, it's certainly powerful, and it'll take much more than a single rapier thrust to break it. Nathan's eyes widened before closing, and as he spoke, there was a slight undertone of respect. Incredible. To have taken so many precautions in a battle you beat me in the beginning, without me realizing it. He took in a deep breath and spoke in a polite tone, not caring about his impending death. As a dying man's wish, may I know where your strength comes from? Death stood there for a good second and thought over her words before speaking. Technically speaking, my strength comes from my sacred gear, absolute demise. It allows me to control ice at will and conjure it from nothingness. Though I have yet to obtain Balance Breaker, I've trained hard to control it. Nathan coughed in surprise. One of the 13 Longinus? So I never had a chance in the first place, huh? She softly smiled. Perhaps. But I don't think my sacred gear is why I won against you. His utter confusion and silence was a sign for her to continue. My friend, Naruto has told me that true strength comes from the inside, not from flashy weapons or destructive techniques. It's only with the immense will and longing to fight for to protect someone was I able to defeat you. Do you understand? Nathan scrunched his eyebrows but eventually nodded. I see. Your bonds and friendship were what helped you triumph over me. She nodded, and in response he sighed. Perhaps if I get another chance to live and fight, I will put this wisdom to use. Until then, farewell. With that, his heart stopped beating and Nathan died. Death stood still, her breasts coming out steadily in the form of steam. Pushing the image of Zeldris and Gelda out of her mind, she visualized Naruto. She thought back to his stunning red hair, his willingness to help her, his calm, collected way of speaking, and the way he treated her. It was nice, knowing that she had a person she could count on. DxD? With Naruto. Things were not looking good for Naruto. Not at all. Because of the enormous strain electricity placed upon his body, Naruto could not prolong the use of Godspeed. Even after training and conditioning his body with what he called torture, and he was still unable to use it as his go-to. He didn't have too much time with Godspeed, so he had deactivated it, his hair returning to its vibrant red and his veins no longer glowing. Unfortunately for him, without it, he had no way of keeping up with Urza's speed. She had spent an eternity conditioning her body and magic, and it showed. As of right now, Naruto was getting his ass kicked. He had attempted to keep his distance, and use his spells as a distraction for him to come in and deliver a blow to her head. Urza had unfortunately seen through that and countered perfectly. Without Godpeed, he simply did not have the physical capabilities to keep up with her. With each opening she exploited, Naruto's body was dealt more and more damage. Eventually, he could no longer stand and now laid in a painful heap near the entrance of the hallway that branched out to the other battlefields. Hitting his head against the floor, he wondered what hurt more, his body or his pride. As Urza's footsteps sounded closer to him, he briefly thought of Sairaorg, his best friend and rival. Knowing him, he would be able to overpower Urza with his brutal kicks and punches. If it means anything, I'm sorry. Please don't take this personally. Urza was just a foot away from Naruto now. Understand that I am but a weapon for Lord Gideon. He took me in when I was just another orphan living with bullies. I had no one. I was meaningless, just another name, swamped beneath millions of ordinary folks. But Lord Gideon swooped in and saved me from despair. He took me in and molded me into something stronger. Since then, he has had my undying loyalty. Naruto spat a glob of blood to the side and looked at Urza. A weapon? You pledged your loyalty to that monster? He slammed his fist on the ground and for a split second, Urza tensed. Did you see what he did to Zeldris and Gelda? Did you see their damn bodies? How can you serve him, knowing he does things like that? She shuddered and nodded slightly. It is indeed unfortunate my master indulges himself in such ways. Her sword trembled ever so slightly before stabilizing itself. However, I am not one to judge him. As I said, Lord Gideon has saved me when no one else would. Only through death will my debt be cleared. Now, if you're done with a quick flick, Naruto sent a small fireball directly at Urza's face. To his utter dismay, she leaned slightly to the side and easily avoided the attack. She sighed. A valiant attempt, but a failure nonetheless. Please don't struggle. If you lie still, everything will be over in a flash. She lifted her sword and plunged it down at his heart. Milliseconds before it sunk into his body, everything went black. DXD? With Meliodas. A strong swing of Meliodas' left hand nearly took Gideon's head off. Ducking underneath the attack, Gideon tried to swing Durandal towards his chest, but his right hand deflected his attack. Instead, Durandal crashed towards the ground, carving in the ground a new hole. His darkness can stand against Durandal? Gideon looked at his sword in shock. Durandal is one of the more destructive swords. Demonic energy shouldn't have a huge impact unless right. How could I forget? His sacred gear is more in tune with his anger, and right now, his fury is at an all-time high with me killing his friends. With his left arm stuck in the wall, Meliodas quickly reformed the axe-like shape into a giant fist and tried squashing Gideon like a bug instead. In response, the Templar placed his other hand beneath Durandal to support it, barely holding back the fist. Meliodas' strike was so strong, the ground underneath the impact was strained with cracks spreading throughout the prison complex. His right hand made contact with Gideon, and the so-called destroyer had just enough time to put up an arm to guard the punch. His bones strained itself to its limits as it protected Gideon from a fatal blow. He flew to the left side of the wall and crashed there. Not a second later, Meliodas rushed at him, with his arms now changed into blades. 1,000 divine cuts. With this technique, Meliodas surprised Gideon, as it deviated from the usual sheer destructiveness from his other moves. Instead, it completely put Meliodas' concentration to the task, as it took every bit of willpower to deliver such a large number of cuts in an instant. Gideon managed to catch sight of around 400 slashes, but the remaining slashes were unseen. Cuts appeared all around his body, and his blood sprayed on the ground. While coughing out a glob of blood. While he briefly nursed his wounds, Meliodas kicked him to the right, now putting himself between Gideon and the prison complex entrance, or in this case, the exit. Are you ready for death? Meliodas cruelly mocked him in a sadistic, cold tone. Have you realized how pathetic this all is? Gideon groaned before picking himself up. Those cuts were a minor annoyance, but the problem was the devil's hits. His armor held no resistance against those bone-shattering kicks, and as a result, his ribs were decimated and there was definitely internal bleeding. Right now, if the noises were any indication, his subordinates, Urza and Nathan, were held off by the other two, Naruto and his death. He didn't know any healing spells either. The situation was much worse than he thought. He had vastly underestimated the kind of power Meliodas had, and it was coming back to bite him in the ass. The darkness he used to create weapons from his own bodies were much more resilient to Durandal than he expected. His sacred gear, Ominous Nebula, was unfavorable, as it drew Meliodas closer to him, something he didn't want happening. Maybe if he had more time to achieve Balance Breaker or discover other properties, he would have put up a better fight. Death was what awaited him. Yet he was not scared at all. All that remained in his brain was his undying will to vanquish these inhuman creatures of darkness. Gideon made up his mind, and the gleam in his eyes changed. There was no longer desperation or a willingness to live. Rather, his singular purpose was to bring down as many yokai and devils with him. If Meliodas was in his regular state, he he would have realized the danger Gideon imposed upon his friends. After all, an animal with its back up against the wall with no way out, a man who knew death was his fate but refused to let it hold his mind, that was the moment he was most dangerous. Quickly shedding his nearly shattered breastplate, Gideon took his bloodied hands and frantically searched for his last resort. From his robes he retrieved a small metal sphere. Inscribed near the middle were the words, "Death is but an illusion. Our loyalty will extend even from the shadowy realms of darkness." Meliodas tilted his head, the condescending look in his eyes still existent. "How curious. Do you think such a trinket will be enough to defeat the likes of me?" Heh. Gideon clicked a button on the top, and enormous amounts of holy energy compressed itself throughout the whole sphere. "You shouldn't underestimate humans. Though, I regret not killing more of your kind." He apathetically shrugged. "Maybe if I spent more time practicing Zeldris' sacred gear instead of dissecting those fools, I'd be able to defeat you." The sphere was tossed towards Meliodas and promptly exploded, showering the entire prison with its blinding light. And for the second time today, Meliodas shocked him. Full counter. With those two words, he cruelly mocked Gideon, deflecting all the life energy of his dead comrades and pure holy light he captured from the corpses of angels. The explosion altered into a destructive light beam that doubled in size before disintegrating Gideon and bringing the entire underground base down. DXD? Inside Naruto's mind. What the hell? Naruto rubbed his eyes to make sure he wasn't dreaming. Is this the afterlife? Wait, do devils even go to an afterlife? Interesting questions. A familiar voice rang all throughout whatever place he was in. What the wait? It's you! Naruto shouted and jumped to his feet, clearly recognizing the voice. You're that voice I heard the day before I got my pieces for my peerage. How perceptive of you. I am indeed this voice you heard that day. I will admit, I am slightly surprised you remember our brief encounter. TCH. Naruto rapidly looked at every corner of the blank room he was currently in, only to find nothing. Just nothing. How could I not? Repeating soon in such a creepy way, I'm surprised I was even able to sleep after that freak show you made me go through. Freak shit? The voice sounded amused. It was a brief repeating of words. Stop overreacting, you baby. Whatever. Naruto sat back down. How am I even here? Wasn't Urza about to send me 6 feet under? And what do you even want from me? The voice silenced itself for what it seemed to be hours before speaking again. To answer your first question, this is a part of your mind. This is where I reside. And yes, Urza was going to, as you eloquently put it, send you 6 feet under. Quite a pathetic showing you put on there, by the way. Before Naruto could even protest, the voice continued in answering his questions. As for what I want is for you to grow stronger. Naruto contemplated the new information he got. What in the Mao was this thing? Was it some sort of entity sealed within him? Why did it matter to this entity if he got stronger or not? Because I want you to show everyone how strong you can be. I want them to see how wrong it was to dismiss you for not inheriting the powers of destruction. I want to see you triumph over Rias and her pathetic peerage. So be grateful I pushed a certain awakening to happen earlier than it was supposed to happen. Take this strength and show the world what it means to be Naruto Uzumaki. Before Naruto could even respond, a blinding white flash forced him to shut his eyes close, and he disappeared. Honestly, I don't know why I even bother. It's pretty pathetic to see such a weak version of myself. I should just take the reins and show you how it's done. Dark miasma coalesced in the center before forming a replica of Naruto, right down to his toned muscles, slightly tanned skin, and crimson hair. The only difference was the eyes. Instead of the usual vibrant blue, it was replaced with pure darkness. But then again, Naruto's clone shook his head. Your kind never gives up. To break that will and take your body from you is just too much work. It's time to try something new. I'll show you, Naruto. This dark version of Naruto promised. Unlike all those other Narutos fighting it out and accepting each other, I'll try something different. Pa! It makes me sick, accepting one's darkness, my ass. I'll drag you into the darkness, and we'll both be on top of this pathetic world. After all, I never go back on my word. DXD? Back in the real world. Right as Urza was about to stab Naruto, a tsunami of power threw her back, and when she recovered, she couldn't stop the sharp intake of breath. Strapped to one of Naruto's hands was a simple, glistening shield. It was perfectly round and there was no fancy design on it, or whatnot. It was a simple black color, but its lackluster looks did not mean it was lacking in power. Urza knew instantly that the shield was bad news and the battle turned for the worse. 1 Divine Nullifier. Naruto searched for the source of noise and saw it. What the hell are you supposed to be? An equally midnight black orb bobbed in the air as if it was apologizing. My apologies, Lord Naruto. To answer your question, I am merely an extension of your sacred gear, jack of all trades. It seems you have awakened your sacred gear. You have no idea how much joy it brings me now that I am allowed to assist you." Naruto was lost. Confused and utterly puzzled but undeniably exuberant in discovering his sacred gear. Wait, that voice mentioned an awakening. Is this what he meant? Can you even speed up one's awakening? How did he even do it from a figment of my mind? Now. Time to kick ass and take names. Let's save the questions for later. Naruto stared at the orb from angles, trying to find out just how it was an extension. Other sacred gears didn't do this, right? At least, that was the case with Istetha's absolute demise. I have a sacred gear? That's wow. He quickly pushed down his feelings of happiness, and readied himself for the incoming battle before noticing something else. Barrier spells. But when? I never cast them, is it Urza? The orb quickly zoomed around Naruto. My apologies for not informing you, Lord Naruto. While I have many more things to tell you, this is one of many versions of your sacred gear. You have rolled a 1 and your 1 just so happens to be a shield. It is known as the 1 Divine Nullifier, and automatically puts up several barrier spells around a certain radius. Not only that, but it also can nullify any magical attack and is incredibly resilient against physical attacks. Even if it breaks, your sacred gear will evolve in a sense and adapt to future attacks of its caliber. Naruto looked at the deceivingly simple shield in disbelief. Evolve? But that means the potential for this weapon is... The orb stopped still. You are right again, Lord Naruto. There is no limit to how strong your sacred gear, and the best part? You have 7 other forms you have yet to discover. Snapping out of her shock, Urza used every ounce of her strength and sped towards Naruto, swinging her sword downwards. Sparks flew as her holy blade failed to even crack the shield. Lessening the pressure on the shield, she seemingly bounced from the ground to the wall, and then to Naruto's back. From there, she slashed downwards, hoping to get Naruto. Instead, a familiar glow surrounded Naruto, and he matched Urza's speed, to her surprise. Godspeed? But I thought he ran out. Was he purposely holding back on purpose, just for this moment? Impossible. He couldn't have calculated his sacred gear awakening into his plans. Just how? He quickly spun around and pivoted to the right, avoiding the slash. With her guard open, he extended his arm back as far as it could go, and used every bit of his strength to smash the shield into her side. The hit was unnaturally powerful, as it sent Urza right into the wall, leaving her in a deep crevice in the said wall. To both of their surprise, her armor shattered into pieces and Naruto took that chance. Still in his reactivated Godspeed, he came up with a last-second plan. With all his might, he endured the pain as he concentrated and condensed all the electrical power into his fist and shoved that hand right into Urza's chest. Chidori. The name of his new technique popped up into his mind and blood sprayed everywhere as Naruto punched right through her flesh. Unable to keep up Godspeed, his brief transformation died down. He had truly spent every last bit of his electricity. Not only that, but his fist that was coated in lightning was also slightly blacked and trembling. Definitely not good. Heh. Naruto looked away from the girl he had just impaled. Even though they were enemies, he could tell Urza wasn't the worst person he'd met. She didn't have a terrible personality, and she was against her master experimenting on Yukai. Perhaps in different circumstances, they could have been friends. But this was reality. And reality hurt. I didn't even get to use my T-trump card. Urza helplessly grasped at Naruto's arm before giving up, her arms falling limply to her sides. At least. She coughed up blood. At least, I was able to serve Lord Gideon to the best of my abilities. Whatever your W weapon is, it holds great power. I hold no shame at losing to you. And with that, Urza died. With a sickening schwelp, Naruto pulled out his arm from Urza's chest and quickly summoned a blue circle. A steady stream of water poured out, and he slowly began to rub out the red from his hands. He sighed mournfully and put one of Urza's arms over his shoulder. The least he could do was give her a burial. What am I supposed to call you? My name is up to you, Lord Naruto. Naruto briefly pondered over this matter before absolving the issue. Alpha. Your name will be Alpha. He stopped in his tracks, as his mind flashed back towards him conversing with Urza. What was it she said? Her debt would only be cleared through death or something like that. If that's the case, as you wish, Lord Naruto. The orb seemingly stiffened. Lord Naruto. It appears that there are enormous amounts of energy being charged up. Naruto, with his sensory abilities, was already on it. He quickly raced towards his death, Mocha, and Elizabeth, before hearing, full counter. To Naruto, it seemed that the energy roughly doubled, and with that, the entire complex collapsed. Boom! Even though the blast was a distance away from him, and he had barrier spells a short distance around him, he was knocked flat on his butt. Not a second later, the ceiling collapsed in on him. With his shield held above his head and a powerful earth elemental spell, Naruto was able to avoid extensive damage. But what about the others? I need to find his death. He summoned a greenish circle on the rubble on top of his shield, and a powerful blast of wind shredded smaller shaped debris and pushed out the larger chunks of rock and metal. Ah, Lord Naruto. You've survived the collapse and any residual light energy exposure. Though, this does not surprise me at all. Naruto ignored Alpha's eccentric comments and rushed towards the general area where his death was located, Urza's dead body still perched next to his shoulders. Wait! Lord Naruto. Alpha, in comedic fashion, desperately tried catching up with his wielder. You should set up barrier spells so hostile entities are not alerted to our presence. Or rather sacred gears didn't have genders, did they? For the reader's sake, Alpha would be male. He definitely sounded masculine. Anyways. Alpha was given not even a sliver of Naruto's attention as he was busy using his wind circles to excavate debris in an attempt to look for his death. If Alpha could sweat drop or face palm, he most definitely would. His death! Naruto desperately shouted. He ran from place to place, using his strength to flip any debris his wind couldn't. His death! Are you Ugh? It turned out he was rudely interrupted by an ice pillar. The thick protrusion created a small enough hole for the Longinus wielder to crawl out of. Naruto, due to his training, had managed to put his shield up, absorbing the brunt of the impact, and was only sent sliding back a few feet. Urza's corpse inanimmately tumbled a distance from him. You're alive. His shoulders lightened as if he was relieved of a huge burden. Man, I thought you got hurt, or something. The redhead looked at her eyes and sighed. She looked back with a near emotionless countenance before softly smiling. I'm fine. She looked away with the barest traces of red creeping up on her face. Thanks for worrying about me. Naruto couldn't help but smile back. Of course. You're one of the people I care about, you know. I'm just glad you didn't die. I'm glad everyone is alright. Alpha interjected. But my previous suggestion still stands. I recommend setting up a barrier so no hostiles will bother us. His death blinked. Naruto, what is this? And what are you holding? She tentatively tried poking the orb with her index finger before the said orb deftly juked her. Naruto sighed. He hoped to put this conversation for later, but it appeared to him his death was not willing to let him go before explaining everything. Lord Naruto, the barrier. DXD? With Meliodas. Right before everything was blown to Kingdom Come, Meliodas had managed to encase himself in a dark orb of darkness. He was smart to do so, as the deflected light that was intended towards Gideon was so potent, due to the mechanism of his full counter, had eaten away at the hastily made barrier. What happened to Mocha and Elizabeth? Was the first thought that ran through his mind. If the life force energy had done extensive damage to him, he could barely imagine what happened to his damper friend and fallen soulmate. The first thing he noticed was that the entire base was in ruins. He looked up and saw the blue sky in all its glory. For a second, he coughed. The damp dust from the dirt and the ruins, he quickly swept his gaze around the collapsed compound. His eyes took in Naruto with a shield of sorts and an orb hovering near him. Standing next to him was his death, and they were engaged in a sort of conversation. A slight flicker of relief traveled throughout his body before he was consumed with worry once more. He closed his eyes before extending his senses throughout the ruins. He could feel Naruto's intense life force, coupled with new potent energy. A sacred gear awakening? Next to him was the cold aura of his death, along with her ridiculously powerful sacred gear. Thankfully, he could not feel anything that resembled the life signature of Gideon. For all intents and purposes, he was wiped from the face of Earth. But why couldn't he feel the energy of Mocha and Elizabeth? Where was it? His blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. Just mere moments ago, he watched Seldris and Gelda's bodies. Their poor, scarred, desecrated bodies that were no doubt buried beneath all this rubble. How could he keep living if they too were dead? This couldn't be happening. A mere flicker in the air was what Meliodas was. Air resistance lost its meaning on him as he defied every law of physics by moving at breakneck speeds. He had to search for them. He had to find them. Why? Because they were still alive. Yes, that had to be the case. Life wouldn't be that cruel to take his love from him. That's right. Numerous appendages formed from his back and began furiously excavating the ground. Chunks and pieces of debris were thrown haphazardly. Desperation was starting to consume the blonde, as he was getting increasingly worried. Why couldn't he sense Mocha or Elizabeth? Why couldn't he sense them if they were alive? There. A pale hand hung limply between two chunks of debris. His appendages twisted and outstretched itself before curling around the rock. Not a second later, it was thrown behind him where it snapped into smaller fragments. Meliodas seemingly teleported to its direction before shooting out every single possible tendril of darkness. In a matter of seconds, the two bodies were revealed. Mocha and Elizabeth laid next to each other. The damper had placed herself on top of Elizabeth, in a futile attempt to protect her from the falling ceiling. Clearly, she had not reacted fast enough, perhaps due to her shock from seeing Zeldris and Gelda. Whatever the reason was, the mountain of rubble had crushed both of them, killing them quickly. No, Meliodas spoke in such a soft tone, and the wind carried the noise away from any intruding ears. This can't wait. Before Meliodas lost control of his powers and blew up the entirety of this place into nothingness, he recalled what he had learned about the peerage system. Instantly, he picked the two corpses up and ran towards Naruto. He was the only one who could save them now. DxD? With Naruto. So yeah? Naruto finished informing his death of his sacred gear, all while Alpha interrupted him with unnecessary snippets of information. That's it. The brunette didn't have anything to say. Quite frankly, she was tired and hungry. All that fighting with the Templars had exhausted her. What she needed now was a nice long shower with a buffet full of meat, seafood, and rice. Is death? She was drooling. Before she could suffer from any humiliation, wind lashed out at her skin, striking at tender, vulnerable points, making her want to curl up in a ball. Keeping her composure, she cast a thin sheen of ice over her skin, save for her face. She would have to brave the harsh wind if she wanted to breathe. Before even getting a chance to ask what happened, Meliodas was in front of Naruto, his eyes no longer a boiling pit of violent rage, but now cloaked and drowning in deep sorrow and melancholy. Please, Meliodas bowed his head towards Naruto. Please save them. Naruto, at the moment, looked shocked, miserable, and abashed. Shocked because Meliodas chose to throw away his pride to beg. Miserable because he realized the medical condition of Mocha and Elizabeth, death. Abashed because Meliodas was bowing to him. Save them? Naruto looked towards the blonde for some kind of confirmation. As far as he was concerned, he couldn't cure death. Unless he was asking. You can save them by adding them to your peerage. Meliodas pleaded with all his heart. Please, they're all I have left. He sobbed, his sacred gear dissipating along with his anger and wrath. Inside the shell of Meliodas remained just sorrow. Naruto hesitated. Normally, he wouldn't add people to his peerage without their consent. He was essentially violating them and taking away any sense of freedom. Because they were dead, they were in no position to decide whether they wanted to join him or not. Yet. Meliodas saw his hesitance. I'll even join your peerage. Surely, you want someone as powerful as me to join you? Power. In the supernatural, all that mattered was power. By bargaining himself as a part of the deal, he had made a deal a good number of devils would kill for. I'll do it. Meliodas noticeably brightened. But I don't want you joining me. Seeing his visible confusion, Naruto took that chance to clarify. I don't want you joining me because you were backed into a corner. I'll only accept you if you truly want to join me out of your free will. The blonde was certainly puzzled. Who would refuse power in a world where power meant everything? He didn't think about it too much, since Mocha and Elizabeth would be rejoining him in the land of the living. Naruto took out a slick, black box and opened it. Inside were his pieces, ready to reincarnate any potential members into his servants' no comrades. Picking out a rook piece, he placed it over Mocha's chest and chanted. I, Naruto Uzumaki Gremory, command you to join me as a comrade. Burn bright with your will to triumph and be reborn as my rook. Not even bothering to check her condition, Naruto hurriedly took out a bishop piece before repeating the ritual. I, Naruto Uzumaki Gremory, command you to join me as a comrade. Burn bright with your will to triumph and be reborn as my bishop. A huge intake of air was the only sign they were alive. With their chests moving up and down in a rhythmic fashion, it was safe to say they were living once more. There. I've done it. Naruto calmly snapped his box shut before putting it back in his zipper pocket. Most likely, they're sleeping because of exhaustion. I don't know what happened to Elizabeth in the prison cells, but Mocha has been through some unbelievable emotional trauma. They'll live, but for the next couple of hours, they'll be out like a light. Meliodas didn't respond at all, merely cradling both girls close to his chest. To him, Elizabeth and Mocha were everything. Elizabeth was his beautiful, caring partner that allowed his perverted antics. Mocha was the little sister he never had and a girl he could teach and pass down combat tricks. Thank Mao they were both alive and well and in his embrace once more. His death tapped Naruto's shoulder. If that's everything, shall we go to a hotel for the night? Naruto almost agreed before recalling a certain set of memories. Hold on. I still have one more thing to do. From a mile away, he spotted Urza's bright crimson hair and walked towards it. His death curiously looked after him before coming to a conclusion. No way, she breathed out. But isn't she a part of you know them? Without looking back, Naruto spoke. Trust me when I say I know what I'm doing. Taking out and opening his box once more, this time, he grabbed on to his mutated knight piece and stopped before the deceased Templar. You said your debt would only be cleared in death, right? I'm sounding hypocritical, but I can't help myself. You're not a bad person, Urza. Besides, if you're really against the idea of being in my peerage, I'll let you go to do what you want. Man, I'm such a hypocrite for this. He mumbled before raising the mutated piece towards Urza. I, Naruto Uzumaki Gremory, command you to join me as a comrade. Burn bright with your will to triumph and be reborn as my knight. One ritual later and Urza was reborn as a half-devil. Now I'm done. Naruto turned back to his death. Let's get out of here. I reserved a hotel room ahead of time, so we should be alright. She nodded, and with Urza on his shoulders, Naruto moved back to his friends. Let's get out of here. A teleportation circle that managed to fit Naruto, his death, Meliodas, and the others gleamed brightly for a second before transporting them to an unknown hotel. Outside the base, a certain blonde-haired figure dressed in priestly robes lurked around the collapsed base. The barrier dropped. He mused before dropping his jaw at the unbelievable sight before him. What kind of weight? The sheath is getting hotter. Determined to succeed in his mission, he leaped down to the crater and began running wildly, guided by the artificial gear. What if neglected Naruto Behemoth High School DxD? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoyed this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.